The European Union address. It is also very much a special honor to have Olena Zelenska with us on this important day. Dear Olena, we are with you and with the Ukrainian people. We are here today against an alarming backdrop of an illegal, unjustifiable invasion of sovereign Ukraine, high inflation, electricity and energy price rises, a climate catastrophe, increased food insecurity and a fast emerging cost of living crisis. I think our message today will be that Europe will respond. And to underline how we will do that, it is my pleasure to give the floor to the President of the European Commission to deliver her 2022 State of the European Union address. Dear Ursula, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam President, honourable members, my fellow Europeans. Never before has this Parliament debated the state of our Union with war raging on European soil. And we all remember that fateful morning in late February. Europeans from across our Union woke up dismayed by what they saw, shaken by the resurgent and ruthless face of evil, haunted by the sounds of sirens and the sheer brutality of war. But from that very moment on, a whole continent has risen in solidarity. At the border crossings where refugees found shelter, in our streets filled with Ukrainian flags, in the classrooms where Ukrainian children made new friends. From that very moment, Europeans neither hid nor hesitated. They found the courage to do the right thing. And from that very moment, our Union as a whole has risen to the occasion. 15 years ago, during the financial crisis, it took us years to find lasting solutions. A decade later, when the global pandemic hit, it took us only weeks. But this year, as soon as Russian troops crossed the border into Ukraine, our response was united, determined, and immediate. And I think we can be proud of that. We have brought Europe's inner strength back to the surface. And we will need all this strength. The moments ahead of us will not be easy, be it for the families who are struggling to make ends meet, or businesses who are facing tough choices concerning their future. And let us be very clear, much is at stake, not just for Ukraine, but for all of Europe and the world at large. And we will be tested by those who want to exploit any kind of division between us. And this is not only a war unleashed by Russia against Ukraine, this is also a war on our energy, it's a war on our economy, it's a war on our values, it is a war on our future. It is about autocracy against democracy. And I stand here with the conviction that with the necessary courage and with the necessary solidarity, Putin will fail and Ukraine and Europe will prevail. Today, Courage has a name, and that name is Ukraine. Courage has a face, and that face is the face of Ukrainian men and women who are standing up to the Russian aggression. I remember a moment in the early weeks of the invasion when the First Lady of Ukraine, Olena Zelenska, gathered the parents of Ukrainian children killed by the invader. Hundreds of families for whom the war will never end and for whom life will never go back to what it was before. We saw the First Lady leading a silent crowd of heartbroken mothers and fathers and hang small bells in the trees, one for every fallen child. And now these bells will ring forever in the wind. And forever, the innocent victims of this war will live in our memories. And yes, she's here with us today. My dear Olena Zelenska, it took immense courage to resist Putin's cruelty. But you found the courage, and a nation of heroes has risen. Today in Ukraine stands strong because an entire country has fought, street by street and house by house. And we are seeing in the last days the bravery of the Ukrainians is paying off. Ukraine stands strong because people like your husband, President Zelensky, have stayed in Kyiv to lead the resistance, together with you and your children. You have given courage to a whole nation. You have given a voice to your people on a global stage. You have given hope to all of us. So today we want to thank you and all Ukrainians. Glory to a country of European heroes. Slava Ukraini. Europe's solidarity with Ukraine will remain unshakable. From day one on, Europe has stood at Ukraine's side with weapons, with funds, with hospitalities for refugees, and with the toughest sanctions the world has ever seen. Russia's financial sector is on life support. We have cut off 3/4 of Russia's banking sector from international markets. Nearly 1,000 international companies have left the country. The production of cars fell by 75% compared to last year. Aeroflot is grounding planes because there are no more spare parts. The Russian military is taking chips from dishwashers and refrigerators to fix their military hardware because there are no semiconductors anymore. Russia's industry is in tatters. And it is the Kremlin that has put Russia's economy on the path of oblivion. That is the price for Russia's and Putin's trail of death and destruction. And I want to make it very clear. The sanctions are here to stay. This is time for us for resolve and not for appeasement. This has to be very clear. The same is true for our financial support for Ukraine. So far, Team Europe has provided more than 19 billion euros in financial assistance, and this is without counting the military support. And we are in for the long haul. Ukraine's reconstruction will require massive resources. For instance, Russian strikes have damaged or destroyed more than 70 schools. 500,000 Ukrainian children have started their school year in the European Union, but many other Ukrainian children simply do not have a classroom to go to. And you told me yesterday, dear Olena, that every day when the parents are sending the children to school, they don't only give them the school bag, but also an emergency bag with water, with food, with band-aids, medical supply, with socks and an underwear to change. And just imagine you send in the morning your child to school, handbag to school, and you do not know whether you're going to be reunited in the afternoon after school. So, my dear Olena, I am announcing that we will work with you to support the rehabilitation of damaged Ukrainian schools. We will provide what you need. This is 100 million euros, because the future of Ukraine begins in the schools and with the children. We will not only support financially, but also empower Ukraine to make the most of its potential. Ukraine has already a rising tech hub and is home to many very young, smart companies. So I want us to mobilize the full power of our single market to help accelerate growth and create opportunities. Please remember, in March we connected successfully Ukraine to our electricity grid. It was planned for 2024. We did it in 2 weeks only. And today, Ukraine is exporting electricity to the European Union. So I want to significantly expand this mutual beneficial trade. We have already suspended import duties on Ukrainian exports to Ukraine. We will bring Ukraine into our European free roaming area. It's really time to do that now. Our solidarity lines are a big success, and building on all of that, the Commission will work with Ukraine to go a step further and to ensure a seamless access to the single market of the European Union. Our single market is one of Europe's greatest success stories. We know the power that lies in the single market. So now it is time to make it a success story for our Ukrainian friends too. And this is why today I'm going to Kyiv to discuss all this with President Zelensky and to show him what the single market is as a potential for Ukraine's future too. My honourable members, one lesson from this war is we should have listened to those who know Putin, to Anna Politkovskaya, and all the Russian journalists who exposed the crimes and paid the ultimate price. To our friends in Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, and the opposition in Belarus, we should have listened to the voices inside our union, in Poland, in the Baltics, and all across Central and Eastern Europe. They have been telling us for years that Putin would not stop. And they acted accordingly. Our friends in the Baltics have worked hard to end their dependency on Russia. They have invested heavily in renewable energy, in LNG terminals, in interconnectors. They made the experience, yes, this comes at a cost, but dependency on Russian fossil fuels comes at a much, much higher price. So we have to get rid of this dependency all over Europe. As you know, therefore, we agreed to join storage. We are now at 84%. That's good. We're overshooting our targets. But unfortunately, this will not be enough. We have to diversify away from Russia to reliable suppliers like the United States and Norway and Algeria and others. Two figures that are interesting. Last year, Russian gas accounted for 40% of our imported gas. Today, it's down to 9%. But we also see that Russia keeps actively manipulating our energy market. I mean, they prefer to flare the gas instead of sending it to Europe according to the contracts that are existing. So this market is not functioning anymore. And in addition, the climate crisis is heavily weighing in our bills. Heat waves have boosted electricity demand, droughts shut down hydro and nuclear plants, and as a result, prices have risen by more than 10 times compared to before the pandemic. Making ends meet is becoming a source of anxiety for millions of businesses and households in the European Union. But we also see how Europeans are coping with this challenge. Think of the workers in ceramic factories in central Italy who have decided to move their shifts to the early morning to benefit from the lower energy prices. And just imagine the mothers and fathers among those workers having to leave home early when the kids are still sleeping because of a war they have not chosen. This is one example in a million of examples of Europeans adapting to the new reality. And I want our union to take example from its people. So reducing demand during peak hours will make supply last longer and it will bring prices down. This is why we're putting forward measures for member states to reduce their overall electricity consumption. And then targeted support is needed for small and medium enterprises, like the glass makers across Europe who cannot longer turn on their ovens, or for single parents facing one daunting bill after the next if they look at electricity. Millions of Europeans need support. This is why we are proposing a cap on the revenues of companies that produce electricity at low costs. These companies are making revenues they never accounted for, they never even dreamt of. And don't get me wrong, in our social market economy, profits are okay, they are good. But in these times, it is wrong to receive extraordinary record revenues and profits benefiting from war and on the back of our consumers. In these times, profits must be shared and channeled to those who need it most. And therefore, our proposal also includes the fossil fuel electricity producers who have to give a crisis contribution. And overall, our proposal will raise more than 140 billion euros for member states to cushion the blow directly. These are all emergency and temporary measures we are working on, including our discussion on gas price caps. We need to keep working on lower gas prices. So on one hand, we have to ensure the security of supply. On the other hand, we have to ensure global competitiveness. The security of supply because the gas still has to come to the European Union, the energy of all. On the other hand, if it's too expensive, it's damaging our global competitiveness. So we will develop with the member states a set of measures to take into account the specific nature of our relationship with suppliers, ranging from unreliable suppliers such as Russia to reliable friends such as our Norwegian friends, for example. I have agreed with Prime Minister Støre to set up a task force so that the teams work for this aim together to look how are we able to lower in a reasonable manner the price for gas. Another important topic is on the agenda. Today, our gas markets have changed dramatically. From pipeline gas we used to have in abundance, mainly to increasing amounts of LNG gas. But the benchmark used in the gas market, the so-called TTF, has not adapted. So this is why the Commission will work on establishing a more representative benchmark for the electricity trading that really reflects this change in the market we have seen. And at the same time, we also know that energy companies are facing severe problems with liquidity in electricity futures markets. We will work with the market regulators to ease these problems by amending the rules on collaterals and by taking measures to limit the intraday price volatility. And we will amend the temporary state aid framework in October to allow for the provision of state guarantees while preserving a level playing field. This is very complex. This is not at all trivial, but I must say these are only the first steps. But because as we deal with the immediate crisis, we must also look forward. And therefore, my diagnosis is the current electricity market designed that is based on the principle of merit order is not fit for purpose anymore. It's not just for consumers anymore. Consumers should reap the benefits of low-cost renewables. That must be the purpose. So we have to decouple the dominant influence of gas on the price of electricity, and this is why we will do a deep and comprehensive reform of the electricity market. Now, honourable members, there is one important point. Half a century ago, in the 1970s, the world faced another fossil fuel crisis. Some of us remember the car-free weekends to save energy. Yet, we kept driving on the same road. We did not get rid of our dependency on oil. And worse, fossil fuels were even massively subsidized. This was wrong, not just for the climate, but also for our public finances and for our independence as we know today. And we're still paying the price for that. Only a few visionaries understood that the real problem was the fossil fuels themselves, not their price. And among them were our Danish friends. When the oil crisis hit, Denmark started to invest heavily into harnessing the power of the wind. They laid the foundation for its global leadership in the sector and created tens of thousands of new jobs. This is the way to go. Not just a quick fix, but a change of paradigm, a leap into the future, and that must be our principle today with this crisis too, honourable members. Mesdames et messieurs les députés, la bonne nouvelle est.
Ladies and gentlemen, members, the good news is that this necessary transformation has already started. It's taking place in the North Sea and in the Baltic, where member states have invested massively in offshore wind. This has taken place in Sicily, where the largest solar power plant in Europe will soon be producing the latest generation of solar panels. In northern Germany, regional trains are now running on green hydrogen. Hydrogen can change the situation completely for Europe. We have to move from a niche market towards a mass market for hydrogen. And with Repower EU, we have redoubled our objectives. We want to produce 10 million tons of renewable hydrogen by 2030. To achieve that, we need to create a new hydrogen market to fill the investment gap and to match supply and demand for the future. So today I will be announcing that we have created a new European Hydrogen Bank. This will help to guarantee the supply of hydrogen using money from the Innovation Fund. It will be able to invest 3 billion euros to help to construct a future hydrogen market. And that is how we will build the economy of the future. That is the Green Deal.
Et nous avons tous vu.
Over the last few months, we've all seen to what extent the Green Deal is important. Summer 2022 will remain in people's memories. We've all seen the dried up rivers, the burning forests, the extreme heat, and the situation is much worse than what we can see. The alpine glaciers have been an emergency reserve for rivers like the Rhone and the Rhine. But as Europe's glaciers are melting faster than expected, future droughts will be much more serious. We have to work tirelessly to adapt to climate change and to make nature our first ally. That's why our union will push for a global agreement on nature that is ambitious when we go to the United Nations Conference on Biodiversity, which will take place in Montreal this year. And we will do the same at the COP27 at Sharm el-Sheikh. But in the short term, we also need to be better equipped to face up to climate change. No country can combat the weather on their own and the destructive force of extreme weather events. This summer, we sent Greek aeroplanes, Swedish aeroplanes, and Italian aeroplanes to combat fires in France and in Germany. But these events are becoming more and more frequent and more intense. Europe needs more capacity. That's why today I announced that we will double our capacity for firefighting. Over the course of the coming year, the European Union will buy 10 light aircraft and 3 additional helicopters to complete its fleet. That is European solidarity in practice.
Honourable members, the last years have shown how much Europe can achieve when it is united. After an unprecedented pandemic, our economic output overtook pre-crisis level in record time. We went from having no vaccines to securing over 4 billion of these life-saving vaccines for Europeans and for the whole world. And in record time we came up with SURE, so that people could stay in their jobs even if their companies had run out of work. We were in the deepest recession since World War II, and we achieved the fastest recovery since the post-war boom. And all that was possible because we all rallied behind a common recovery plan. Next Generation EU has been a boost of confidence for our economy, and its journey has only just begun. So far, 100 billion euros have been disbursed for member states, to member states. This means 700 billion euros still haven't flown into our economy. Next Generation EU will guarantee a constant stream of investment to sustain jobs and growth. It means relief for our economy, but most importantly, it means renewal. It is financing new wind turbines and solar parks, high-speed train and energy-saving renovations. We conceived Next Generation EU almost 2 years ago, and yet it is still exactly what Europe needs today. So let's stick to the plan and bring the money to the ground. It has to be delivered because it's necessary now as investment. And, honourable members, the future of our children needs both. That we invest in sustainability, but also that we invest sustainably. We must finance the transition to a digital and net zero economy. And yet, we also have to acknowledge a new reality of higher public debt. We need fiscal rules that allow for strategic investment while safeguarding fiscal sustainability. Rules that are fit for the challenges of this decade. And therefore, in October, we will come forward with new ideas for our economic governance. Let me share a few basic principles with you. Member states should have more flexibility on their debt reduction path. there should be more accountability on the delivery of what we have agreed on. There should be simpler rules that all can follow. To open the space for strategic investments, we need it. And to give the financial markets the confidence they need. So let us chart once again a joint way forward. With more freedom to invest, that's necessary. More scrutiny on the process. What has been agreed has to be done. More ownership by member states and better result for the citizens. So in short, let's rediscover the Maastricht spirit. Stability and growth can only go hand in hand. Because, honourable members, as we embark on this transition in our economy, we must rely on the enduring values of the social market economy. It's the beautiful, simple idea that Europe's greatest strength lies in each and every one of us. Our social market economy encourages everyone to excel, but it also takes care of the fragility as human beings. It covers the big risks of life, like poverty, sickness, age. It rewards performance and guarantees protection. It opens opportunities, but it also sets limits. And we need this today even more than ever. Because the strength of our social market economy will drive the green and the digital transition. And our Achilles heel for the small and medium enterprises are basically three things. It's, do we have an enabling business environment? It's the question, do we have a workforce with the right skills? And do we have access to raw materials our industry needs? This will be the three crucial questions to answer right now, to have a future with the model as I've described right now. We must, for our SMEs, remove the obstacles that still hold them back. They must be at the center of this transformation, because they are the backbone of our industry and Europe's long history of industrial prowess. And they have always put their employees first, even and especially in times of crisis. But inflation and uncertainty are weighing especially hard on them. This is why we will put forward an SME relief package. It will include a proposal for a single set of tax rules for doing business in Europe called BFIT. It will make it easier to do business in our union, less red tape, better access to the dynamism of our continental market, and, honourable members, it is high time that we revise the Late Payment Directive, because it's simply not fair that 1 in 4 bankruptcies, that's 25% of all bankruptcies, are due to invoices not being paid in time. This can't be possible. For millions of family businesses, we have to revise this Late Payment Directive. This will be a lifeline in troubled waters. Meine sehr geehrten Damen und Herren Abgeordnete.
Ladies and gentlemen, members. The second big topic is the lack of staff for our companies. That's a major challenge for European companies. The number of unemployed has never been so low, 6.0%. 6% unemployment, that's a good thing. But at the same time, the number of unfilled vacancies is at record levels. HGV drivers, airport staff, nurses, engineers, IT technicians. right from unskilled levels to the highest university degrees. We need people at all levels, and we need to invest more in further education and higher education. We need a careful knowledge of what staff are needed and how we can fill those vacancies. We need to combine that with the wishes of workers for their own careers. We've got the ESF, that's a great instrument, and at the same time we need a structure that ensures that the money is effectively used. And there's another important point. We need to get qualified staff from abroad that can strengthen Europe's growth. So an important step is to ensure that these people can get their qualifications recognized more rapidly in Europe. That's one way to make Europe more attractive for everyone who's got skills and that want to be part of Europe. So I propose that the year 2023 should be Europe's year of education and training. That is the right priority. It's a step forward. Members, ladies and gentlemen, third point that's very important. Our small and medium-sized companies, all of our industrial sector, well, it doesn't matter whether we're talking about chips and augmented reality, storage for solar power facilities, but access to commodities, to raw materials, is decisive for the success of our transformation to a sustainable and digital economy. Lithium and rare earths are going to be more important soon than oil and gas are today. Our needs for raw earths alone, so rare earths alone, fivefold by 2030. I think this just shows how rapidly we are moving forward on the European Green Deal. The problem is that at the moment there's just one country that almost completely controls the entire market. We need to avoid finding ourselves stuck in dependence of the kind of dependence that we now see with oil and gas. A lot of steps must be taken on that front, but trade policy comes into question there. We need new partnerships. Geographically, these raw materials are not just located in one place on Earth. We need new partnerships, not just to strengthen our economy, but also to pursue our interests and values at the global level. With similarly minded partners, we can work beyond our borders to improve labour and environmental conditions. We need new, reliable partners where we can mutually grow. The agreement with Chile, Mexico and New Zealand will be put forward for ratification, and we will continue negotiations with partners like Australia and India. We need to learn from the mistakes of the past.
Is only a first step. The processing of these metals is just as critical. And today, China controls the global processing industry. Almost 90% of rare earth and 60% of lithium are processed in China. So we will identify strategic projects all along the supply chain, from extracting to refining, from processing to recycling, and we will build up strategic reserves where supply is at risk. This is why today I am announcing a European Critical Raw Materials Act. We know that this approach can work, because remember, 5 years ago, Europe launched the Batteries Alliance. And soon, 2/3 of the batteries we need, we will produce here in Europe. That's a big success story. Last year I announced the European Chips Act. And the first chips gigafactory will break ground in the coming months. So we now need to replicate this success for raw materials. And this is also why we will increase our financial participation in the important projects of common European interest, the so-called IPCEIs. And for the future, I will push to create a new European Sovereignty Fund, because we have to make sure that the future of the industry is made in Europe. Honourable members, as we look around at the state of the world today, it can often feel like there is a fading away of what once seemed so permanent. And in some ways, the passing of Queen Elizabeth II last week reminded us all of that. She is a legend. She was a constant throughout the turbulent and transforming events in the last 70 years, stoic and steadfast in her service, but more than anything, she always found the right words for every moment in time. From the call she made to war evacuees in 1940 to her historic address during the pandemic, she spoke not only to the heart of her nation, but to the soul of the whole world. And when I think of the situation we're in today, her words at the height of the pandemic still resonate with me. She said, "We will succeed, and that success will belong to every one of us." End of quote. She always reminded us that our future is built on new ideas and founded in our oldest values. Since the end of World War II, we have pursued the promise of democracy and of the rule of law. And the nations of the world have built together an international system promoting peace and security, justice and economic progress. Today, this is the very target of Russian missiles. What we saw on the streets of Bucha, in the scorched fields of grain, and now in the gates of Ukraine's largest nuclear plant, is not only a violation of international rules, it is the deliberate attempt to discard them once and for all. That we have to know. And this watershed moment in global politics calls for a rethink of our foreign policy agenda. This is the time to invest in the power of our democracies. This work begins with a core group of our like-minded partners, our friends in every single democratic nation on the globe. We see the world with the same eyes. We share the same values, and we should mobilize our collective power to shape global goods. We should strive to expand the core of these democracies. The most immediate way to do this is to deepen our ties and strengthen democracies on our continent. This starts with those that are already on the path to our union. We must be at their side by every step and every day, because the path towards strong democracies and the path towards our union are one and the same. And so I want to know the people of the Western Balkans, Ukraine, Moldova and Georgia, to know, and I think I speak in the name of this noble house, you are part of our family, you are the future of our union and in our union, and our union is not complete without you. This has to be the message. And we have seen that there is a need to reach out to other countries of Europe beyond the accession process. This is why I support the call for European political community, and we will set out our ideas to the European Council. But our future also depends on our ability to engage beyond the core of our democratic partners. Countries near and far share an interest in working with us on the greatest challenges of this century, such as climate change and digitalization. And this is the main idea behind Global Gateway, the investment plan I announced last year right at this place. It is already delivering on the ground. Together with our African partners, we're building 2 factories in Rwanda and Senegal to manufacture mRNA vaccines. So they will be made in Africa, for Africa, with world-class technology. And we are now replicating this approach across Latin America as a part of a larger engagement strategy that has to pick up now urgently. All this requires investment on a global scale. So we will team up with our friends in the United States and our friends in the G7 partners to make this happen. In this spirit, President Biden and I will convene a leaders' meeting to review and announce implementation projects for this investment. Honourable members, this is part of our work of strengthening our democracies. But we should not lose sight of the way foreign autocrats are targeting our own countries. Foreign entities are funding institutions and institutes that undermine our values. The disinformation is spreading from the internet into the halls of our universities. Earlier this year, the University of Amsterdam shut down an allegedly independent research center, which was actually funded by Chinese entities. And this center was publishing so-called research on human rights, dismissing the evidence of forced labor camps for Uyghurs as rumors. These lies are toxic for our democracies. And let's think about this. We introduced legislation to screen foreign direct investment in our companies for security reasons. That's correct, that's good that we did it. But if we do that for our economy, shouldn't we do the same for our values? We need to better shield ourselves from malign interference. And this is why we will present a Defence of Democracy Pact. It will bring forward covert foreign influence. It will shed the light on shady funding. We will not allow any autocracy's Trojan horses to attack our democracies from within. For more than 70 years, our continent has marched towards democracy. But the gains of our long journey are not assured. And many of us have taken democracy for granted for too long, especially those who, like me, who have never experienced what it means to live under the fist of an authoritarian regime. Today, we all see that we must fight for our democracies. Every single day, every single minute. We must protect them both from the external threats they face, but also from the vice that corrode them from within. It is my Commission's duty and the most noble role to protect the rule of law. So let me assure you, we will keep insisting on judicial independence. And we will make sure that we protect our budget through the conditionality mechanism. And today I would like to focus on corruption with all its faces. The face of foreign agents trying to influence our political system. The face of shady companies or foundations abusing public money. If we want to be credible when we ask candidate countries to strengthen their democracies, we must also eradicate corruption at home. And this And this is why, in the coming year, the Commission will present measures to update our legislative framework for fighting corruption. We will raise standards on offences such as illicit enrichment, trafficking in influence, abuse of power, beyond the more classic offences such as bribery. And we will also propose to include corruption in our human rights sanctions regime, our new tool to protect our values abroad. Honourable members, our founders only meant to lay the first stone of this democracy. They always thought that future generations would complete their work, and that's true. We have to do that. It's an ongoing process. Democracy has not gone out of fashion, but it must update itself in order to keep improving people's lives. You will remember these words. These are the words of our friend David Sassoli, a great European. Democracy has not gone out of fashion, but it must update itself in order to keep improving people's lives. David Sassoli thought that Europe should always look for new horizons. And through the adversity of these times, we have started to see what our new horizon might be. A braver union, closer to its people in times of need, bolder in responding to historic challenges and the daily concerns of our Europeans, and to walk at their side when they deal with the big trials of life. This is why the Conference on the Future of Europe was so important. It was a sneak peek of a different kind of citizens' engagement, well beyond election day. And after Europe listened to its citizens' voice, we now need to deliver. The citizens' panels that were central to the conference will now become a regular feature of our democratic life. And in the letter of intent that I have sent today to President Metsola and Prime Minister Fiala, I have outlined a number of proposals for the year ahead that stem from the Conference on the Future. They include, for example, a new initiative on mental health. We should take much better care of our friends and partners and beloved ones. And for many who are burdened with anxiety and who are lost, appropriate, accessible, that's so important, and affordable support can be life-saving. We know that this support is not there today. Excessive, affordable, and appropriate support. So we have to make sure, with proposals on mental health, that we really improve in this subject. It is, for some of our fellow Europeans, life-saving. Honourable members, democratic institutions must constantly gain and regain the citizens' trust. Just like Europeans did when millions of Ukrainians came knocking on their door. What we saw was and is Europe at its best, a union of determination and solidarity. But this determination and drive for solidarity is still missing in our migration debate. Our actions towards Ukrainian refugees must not be an exception. They can be a blueprint for going forward. We need fair and quick procedures, a system that is crisis-proof and quick to deploy, and a permanent and legally binding mechanism that ensures solidarity. And at the same time, we need effective control of our external borders, in line with the respect of fundamental rights. I want a Europe that manages migration with dignity and respect. I want a Europe where all member states take responsibility for the challenges we all share. I want a Europe that shows solidarity to all member states. We have progress on the pact. We now have the roadmap, and we now need the political will to move forward and to match. Honourable members, 3 weeks ago, I had an incredible opportunity of joining 1,500 young people from all over Europe and all over the world that gathered in Tesi. They have very different views. They come from very different countries. They speak different languages. They have different backgrounds. And yet, there's something that connects them. They share a set of values and ideals. They believe in these values. They are determined to reach them. They are passionate about something that is larger than themselves. And this generation is a phenomenal generation. It's a generation of dreamers and makers. And in my last State of the Union, I told you that I would like Europe to look more like these young people. We should put their aspirations at the heart of everything we do. And the place for this is in our founding treaties. Every action that our union takes should be inspired by a very simple principle, that we should do no harm to our children's future, and that we should leave the world a better place for the next generation. And therefore, honourable members, I believe that it is time to enshrine solidarity between generations in our treaties. It is time to renew the European promise. And we also need to improve the way we do things and the way we decide things. Some might say this is not the right time. But if we are serious about preparing for the world of tomorrow, we must be able to act on the things that matter the most for people. And as we are serious about a larger union, we also have to be serious about reform. So as this Parliament has called for, I believe the moment has arrived for a European Convention. Honourable members, they say light shines brightest in the dark. And that was certainly true for the women and the children fleeing Russia's bombs. They fled a country at war, filled with sadness for what they had left behind and fear for what may lie ahead. But they were received with open hearts and open arms by many, many citizens like Magdalena and Agnieszka, two selfless young women from Poland. As soon as they heard about trains full of refugees, they rushed to the Warsaw Central Station. They started to organize. They set up a tent to assist as many people as possible. They reached out to supermarket chains for food and to local authorities to organize buses, to hospitality centers. In a matter of days, they gathered 3,000 volunteers to welcome refugees 24/7. Honourable members, Magdalena and Agnieszka are here with us today. Please stand up. Magdalena, stand up. Stand up. Their story is about everything our union stands and strives for. It is a story of heart, character and solidarity. They showed everyone what Europeans can achieve when we rally around a common cause. This is Europe's spirit, a union that stands strong together, a union that prevails together. Long live Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear President, dear Ursula. I now move to the reactions by the political groups, starting with the leader of the EPP group, Manfred Weber.
Madam President of the European Parliament, Madam President of the European Commission, Madam Zelensky, Czech Presidency, dear colleagues. Last week, the hemicycle in Brussels was full with young people. We organised as EPP Group a youth week at the beginning of the autumn session. And during the discussion, Eva Majdel, a young colleague of ours, spoke about a moving encounter during summer. She was in Bulgaria, in a supermarket checkout, and there was a young lady. She didn't speak very well Bulgarian. She talked with her and was an Ukraine refugee. Young, talented. She was excited to start her university studies, and then war, fleeing, losing loved ones. She was from Mariupol and ending up in uncertainty. That is the brutal reality of Putin's war. And on the other hand, in my constituency, I received a letter from a small bakery. After decades of baking Bavarian bread, he wrote to me he cannot survive with the high energy costs. The baker told me, Putin is a war criminal, no doubt about this, but how can I survive? These two stories mark the challenge in front of us. And our EPP answer is, we need a winter of solidarity. Solidarity, first of all, with Ukraine, more weapons, more money, more solidarity. Putin must lose, Ukraine must win. Great news from Ukraine that they are pushing back the Russian troops from their soil. And Madam Zelensky, we admire what your soldiers are doing there on the front line. Thank you for this. And dear friends, solidarity among Europeans. Nobody left behind. We care for the poor in our societies and help our economies, especially the SMEs. Crisis times means now leadership. And the EPP supports the proposal of the Commission presented today on support for Ukraine, but also to give an answer on the soaring energy prices. But there is more to do. The markets, dear ladies and gentlemen, are obviously speculating against European solidarity when winter will really be hard. And let's be concretely driven by energy. First, it's an ECB task, that's clear. But I think we also can contribute. One example, we have a global food crisis, and that is also increasing the prices for our citizens. And the Commission is now presenting new regulations which will limit food production in Europe and produce more bureaucratic burden for our farmers. For new legislation, the Commission promised the principle of one in and one out. If we continue like this, then at the end of the mandate we will arrive to 5 in and only 1 out. Dear friends, we have war in Europe, and parts of the Brussels community are continuing to make new laws and new burdens as nothing has happened. That's why we as EPP Group are asking for a moratorium on new legislation. Let our business, especially the SMEs, do their work without burdening them. And for creating growth and having recession now in mind, we as EPP stand for creating a union of democratic economies on global level. Europe is a trading continent, and if we want to limit our dependency on the autocracies, on China and others, and that is the lesson we learned out of the Russian gas war, then we must speed up on trade deals with other democracies. And as EPP we always did so, but I just want to remind ourselves about the CETA debate in this House, where the left, Greens and part of the Socialists were opposing to doing a trade deal with Canada. Yes. Canada, dear friends. You frightened Europeans with misleading arguments and even with lies, and until now Scholz and Macron are not ready to ratify CETA on national level. But they are great in doing pictures with Trudeau. That is not serious, dear friends. That is not serious. And about democracies, yes, Madam President, you spoke about defending rule of law, and with you as Commission President, and I have to say also in Poland with friends like Donald Tusk, we as EPP, we are fighting for rule of law. You stopped the money as EPP President of the Commission to Poland and Hungary. That's why we are very, very proud about this. Rule of law must be judged and based on clear criteria, fair procedure, and must be blind, like justice, without looking at party books. And speaking about democracies, I have to come back to the energy proposals. And Madam President, we spoke about this. You have our full support on the procedure, but on the content, but on the procedure, I have to say, we have to respect the European Parliament as a people's chamber. Can you imagine a windfall tax and a price cap being decided on national level without a vote in the national parliament, we would call this a democratic problem. But now we have proposals on the table who are doing this on Europe, and that should not be the new normal on European level. So decisions without the European Parliament should not be the new normal in Europe. And that's why please consider again the legal base for the proposals on the table. The EPP stands for a democratic Europe, and that means a Europe where all legislation is voted in this chamber. And then finally, during the COVID crisis, dear friends, we were ready for doing bigger steps. CRRF, proposed by Ursula von der Leyen, is bigger than the Marshall Plan was. So we changed the architecture of Europe. That was great. But today, war is back in Europe. There was no council meeting on coordinating our defense activities. Only words. There is no initiative to stop unanimous vote on foreign affairs. Only a speech from Chancellor Scholz in Prague. No convention to strengthen the European democracy requested by this chamber and the Conference for the Future of Europe. Only, I have to say, campaigning in Paris. The Commission has to launch now, until December, a European Defence Action Plan as a concrete initiative in this field, to invest together, to build up a European missile defence system and a cyber brigade, to make Europe stronger on this. And we need, and thanks for your clear statement, a convention now. EPP stands for a more ambitious Europe. The times of Sunday speeches are over. Europe will be not saved by university pulpit speeches, but by political leadership. And the Ukraine refugee in Bulgaria and my baker, they believe in this and they understand this. That's why leadership and leadership now.
Thank you very much. Manfred, I now give the floor to Irache Garcia Perez, chair of the S&D Group.
Gracias, Presidenta Metsola.
Thank you, President Metsola, President von der Leyen, Czech presidency. I'd like to start with some word of thanks to Magdalena and Agnieszka for your commitment, your solidarity, but above all, because you're a clear example of the history of Europe. Europe who has always shown welcomes to people, who've always opened their arms to those who are fleeing war and hunger. Europe who wanted to demonstrate that solidarity is one of their values. A mixed Europe, a multiple Europe, a Europe that we remain extremely proud of, so thank you. It's very difficult to assess the state of the Union without repeating the words that we've been saying for a very long time now. We're facing historic challenges. We saw that in the COVID pandemic, and we're now facing challenges with the war that was started by Vladimir Putin, who is threatening our values and the international balance. That's why it's so important that we maintain our unity and we strengthen our commitment to freedom and the integrity of Ukraine. And at the same time, we have to act quickly with ambition and solidarity in order to reduce the social and economic effects of this war. You just have to go to the supermarket to see that the typical shopping basket prices are increasing every day. Measures have been taken to contain inflation, but the price of food and energy are increasing with no limit. The European Central Bank has increased the cost of capital, but this means that mortgages are going up without even referring to heating bills. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the state of our union. Let's be clear. Being clear, however, doesn't mean that we should be pessimistic nor fatalistic. We're here to find solutions, to try to find solutions which do exist. We also have to ensure that we have the political will to implement those solutions. As always, crises make our weaknesses clear, but they also show us where we need to act. We have to strengthen our social policies, reform the energy market, reform fiscal and economic governance, and to accelerate the green transition. We can't leave it too late. Our commitment to the Ukrainian people is clear. However, to get the support of the European citizens, we don't just have to celebrate military victims. We also have to ensure that we put ourselves in the shoes of those who are suffering from this war, including those in the European Union, because without that, we're going to see a backlash against the war, as well as populism and the extreme right. President von der Leyen, we have always been loyal partners during the pandemic, and we will be again now to tackle this crisis and to avoid recession. It's late in the day, but I'm very happy that finally we are seeing a reaction and that you have listened to the proposals that have been made by the Socialists and Democrats by a long time now. We have to cap gas prices and help families and businesses to make sure they can pay their bills. To do that, we have to do that partially with the extraordinary windfall profits of the energy companies. Everyone has to do their bit. It's not fair that some people have difficulty reaching the end of the month, and yet others are profiting from the suffering of these families. We are not the centre of the world. I've just come back from Latin America, and this should be a priority for the Union. At the moment, it's not. I was happy to hear Madame von der Leyen refer to Latin America. It shows that we need more cooperation. Latin America is a natural ally in the global order. We have to be more present there and not leave a void that can be filled by other powers. I'm concerned by the rise of the extreme right. We have to stand firm on the rule of law, and the Commissioner von der Leyen is the guarantor of principles and the treaties. We have to be very clear and firm on this. To conclude, leaving aside institutional issues, I want to talk about the political situation that we're facing at the moment. I'm saddened to have to say this, but the state of our democracy at this historic moment, I think, is just as fragile as our economy. Ghosts we thought were in the past are coming back. Some member states are becoming autocracies, such as Hungary under Orban, and other pro-fascist parties can win elections. This is dangerous and worrying. Mr. Weber, members of the EPP, I'm standing here urging you to reconsider your role in the European project. After the Second World War, the founders of Christian democracy understood that the best example of patriotism was to work for the common interest of the whole of the European Union, together with social democracy, not an exclusive nationalism. I see that you are losing your way and normalizing the entry of the extreme right into these institutions. I hope you will put this right. I hope that you will find your way, because we have a shared responsibility. Europe is counting on us.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Garcia Perez. Now, on behalf of the Renew Europe group, the chair, Stéphane Séjourné.
Merci, Madame la.
Thank you, Madam President. President, 200 days now. For 200 days now, the Ukrainian people has been fighting the Russian aggressor. For 200 days, they've been fighting for their freedom and for our freedom. Their struggle is ours. It is the struggle of democracy against autocracy, the struggle of the rule of law against the law of the strongest. It's the freedom against oppression, our union against its enemies. The last few months we've held the line all together. But now the populists are coming up with very dangerous proposals. War isn't just sanctions, but this war is having consequences on the daily lives of our citizens, the quantity of energy, the quantity of food available, maybe in future the jobs available in Europe. We need to respond rapidly and well. Europe can be effective, and your speech, Madam von der Leyen, it proves this. Your proposals are good, and I'd like to thank you for the democratic exercise that you have just embarked upon. All of these projects are ones that we support, and particularly on the main front we face, which is the energy front. We're in favour of a European energy shield to reduce bills, and I think there are even two forms of European solidarity. European solidarity with Europe's citizens and SMEs, using the windfall profits from the energy companies and setting a cap on gas is solidarity between the member states and our neighbours. We need to make joint purchases of energy. We need to invest surpluses into investing in renewables and renovation of buildings. That is an objective for our group. We want to make our continent the first one to abandon fossil fuels. But out on the extremes, there are these very glib solutions. They say get rid of the sanctions, as if the sanctions were the cause of Europe's problems. Even if Russia's GDP has fallen by 6%, the Russian army is trying to get resupplies by Iran and North Korea. We've received information yesterday about the kinds of huge figures, 300 million euros, that have been sent to European political parties in Europe and abroad to carry out interference. The European Parliament should deal with this. The institutions should deal with this. There are proposals against foreign intervention in Europe. Our group supports those proposals. We need to work harder on this, because it's a democratic challenge primarily. The other main issue is sovereignty. Sovereignty means that we should reduce all of our dependencies. Well, in the food sector, I could just mention that. We can't risk a breakdown in food supplies. We need to work upstream on raw materials, health, digital sector, infrastructure, defence. My group is in favour of a new action plan to identify our vulnerabilities and to try and reinforce our value chains within Europe. As a union, every single question we need to be asking ourselves this question, and as parliamentarians in particular, will the decision we're taking make us more sovereign or more dependent? We propose a sovereignty test to test the conformity of the whole European acquis, of any new European legislation that we have put together between the Parliament and Commission. We need to check our budgetary lines, our investments for the future, in line with the sovereignty test. Now, all of our public policies have to be aligned with the strategic autonomy objective. That's the only way to ensure that the EU is not just an economic power, but a geopolitical power. And that's something that you stressed before this plenary at the beginning of your term in office. We need to guarantee equality and quality of life for our citizens, economic growth, the green transition, and our place in the world. All of these proposals raise a fundamental question for our institutional and budgetary framework. The Union has shown that it can show agility and flexibility over the last few months. But the question is not just the question of the convention that you're putting forward. First of all, when we'll be able to how long we'll be able to continue deciding things by unanimity, and at what price? And then if we are to invest together, we need to know what priorities we're picking out. That's what we need to know before we launch a convention. That is what we need to know before we go before the Council. We have been among the first to call for a conference on the future of Europe, calling for a review of our budget. And a convention can follow that up. I'm sure that you'll find that my group's position is clear and will not surprise you. And I'm sure you won't be surprised that I raise the rule of law. The rule of law has to be our compass. It has to guide our actions beyond our borders and within the European Union. I'm thinking particularly of Mr. Orban. Now, for 10 years, we've been looking the other way. This indifference has led to corruption and discrimination spreading wildly in the country. The media are under state control and spread Russian propaganda. There are problems elsewhere too, in Poland in particular, which is a very different case. But all of this kind of backsliding has to be combated. Other countries are moving into unknown democratic terrain, such as Italy. We need to hold firm, Madam President. We are counting upon you. We are counting upon all of the College of Commissioners. Multiple crises are bringing out that the approach that you took in 2019 is the right one. The transition, democracy, Renew is proud of what we've already been able to achieve. We've got through these crises, and we will give you our support for concluding the projects that you've put forward to us. We shall not hesitate, we shall not delay, and we shall not forget how important it is for us to work together in this new international situation. I think we are up to the challenge, Madam President.
Merci beaucoup, Stefan. I give the floor now to Ska Keller, the head of the Green Group.
Dear Commission President, dear colleagues, and dear Ms. Zelenska, it's a big honor that you are here with us today, and your presence reminds us that while we talk a lot about the problems that we're facing in the EU, the real consequences of this war of aggression of Putin are carried by the people in Ukraine. A brutal invasion led against the peaceful people of Ukraine simply because they chose to live in freedom and democracy. And Putin cannot live with the fact that people live in liberty, with human and civil rights, and that nations work together peacefully. Freedom and democracy, principles the EU was founded on, are the biggest threats to him. And all together, we must face this atrocious aggression with determination and with courage, just as Ukraine is showing us. Europe needs to support and continue to support Ukraine in their fight for peace and self-determination, and even scale up those efforts. And the past days have shown that the Ukrainian people are able to resist the attack, and it is now that Europe needs to stand by their side, by your side. While Ukraine suffers most from the attack, there is also consequences for the EU. We must be prepared for tough times ahead. To do that, we must show solidarity to the outside, but also to the inside, by ensuring that the costs and consequences are carried by the stronger shoulders in our society. With the skyrocketing energy and food prices, we must act. We know that many citizens in our union are fearful of what the winter will bring, fearful of being unable to heat their homes, feed their children, pay their bills. And we cannot turn a blind eye to the situation of the most vulnerable people in our union. Already now, every fifth person in the EU lives in poverty, and the scale of the increasing prices means that many more households will be at risk. It is our duty to ensure that people who are struggling get support, and that the greed and profits of a few don't lead to misery of many. So let's take bold policy steps to make sure that everyone gets through these tough times. And I welcome the Commission President's proposal to skim off windfall profits from energy companies, something that we as Greens EFA Group have been calling for since the beginning of this crisis. The only true way to end our energy dependency is, on the one hand, to use less energy, and on the other hand, to produce more renewable energy. Sun and wind provide us with much more power than we could ever possibly use. So let's profit from that. Fossil fuels have been a driver for ecological disaster and for dangerous dependency. Renewables are the true catalyzers for peace, security and stability. Now is the time to scale up investments into renewables, to put solar on every roof, insulate buildings, and make sure sun and wind carry us into a new era of sustainable and affordable European energy production. And let's make no mistake, Commission President and colleagues, the climate crisis is probably the biggest political test for our generation. All over Europe, we experience the devastation the climate crisis is bringing and will bring to our continent and to the world. This summer, massive droughts and heat waves have paved the way for wildfires, killing a substantial amount of our harvest as well, and led to thousands of deaths that came prematurely. The cost of non-action is immense. It is time to act and to quickly build a brighter, cleaner future, to capitalize on the enormous potential that the green transition brings in terms of sustainable economic development, well-paying and future-proof jobs, cleaner air and better quality of life for our citizens. Dear colleagues, dear Commission President, Putin's war against Ukraine is also targeted at our EU values and at democracy. In order to stand strong against opponents and threats, we have to defend those values within the EU and without exception. And I'm grateful for your strong words on rule of law, Commission President. However, we have heard very promising words before. What we're lacking is action. Thanks to Parliament, we have instruments at hand, but now they need to be used, including the rule of law conditionality. Dear Commissioner President, please respect the conditionality instrument and the political will of this Parliament. No money should be given to the governments of Poland and Hungary unless they clearly return to the path of rule of law. And I want to tell to our dear colleagues from the EPP, and especially to you, Mr. Weber, be careful whom you form partnerships with. Looking at Italy, you are playing a risky game with democracy and with our shared values, just for power. A game that could backfire for all of us. A group that claims to be part of the democratic majority should not partner with people who wear Putin fan shirts, nor parties with fascist logos, not in Italy, not in Spain, not in Sweden, not in the EP, nowhere and never. And it is a bit awkward that I say this as a Green, but the centre-right has a very important role to play in Europe, and part of this, together with all of us, is to ward off the extreme right. And if you open the door to them, you are doing a big, big disservice to Europe, but I believe also to your own party. Dear Commission President and dear colleagues, yes, the State of Union is full of challenges stemming from the war in Ukraine, to the rule of law, to the climate crisis. We are facing a big test. However, I am convinced that the EU has the strength to face these challenges if we work together. Work together towards a new energy independence, a climate-neutral continent, and, maybe most importantly, for a European Union that deserves and maintains the trust of our European citizens, founded on values, founded on solidarity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Keller. And now I give the floor to the chair of the ID group, Marco Zanni. Onorevole, prego.
Grazie, President.
Thank you, President, Madam Zelenska. Welcome. It's important that you are here today, and what's also important is that today we have heard that in this institution, in this chamber, there is full transversal support for Ukraine against Russia, and that will continue. Before I go into the topics that Madam von der Leyen raised, I would like to make a suggestion to our Green and Socialist friends. Given that they have no new ideas, they continue to warn against the threat of fascism in Europe. You just have to speak to citizens, to businesses. I can promise you that none of them are concerned about a fascist threat. What they are concerned about is that they are having to deal with the damage caused by years of devastating policies that have been put forward by these groups in Europe. Now, on what President von der Leyen has said, it was a nice speech that we listened to, but unfortunately, President, it is merely a speech. It's just words. You said that the Commission is going to be putting forward some measures to try to face up to this tragic situation, one like this continent has never experienced. But these measures, if I may, are far from being enough to bring genuine support to the blameless people who are suffering because of this tragic situation. Businesses are closing, production is stopping, shops are shutting, and citizens can no longer make ends meet because the cost of living is increasing exponentially across Europe. And now, as you said, it's true that the main blame for this does not lie in Europe, but the unjustified aggression that we've seen. But since the 24th of February, Europe has been responsible for protecting its own citizens against the consequences that we could all imagine and that we were all aware from the beginning could arise. Europe can be blamed for not having acted quickly enough. You just recently said that democracy has a price. If we want democracy, then there are certain procedures that we have to follow. Dialogue, discussion, then action. However, this cannot be used as a pretext for not acting and for not taking the responsibility that lies with European institutions. Gas price caps is the only measure that may somewhat help our citizens and businesses against the crisis that they are experiencing. But yet this remains something that is merely rhetoric, it remains merely words, it's just discussed, but it's discussed in terms that does not give hope to those people who are suffering all too clearly because of the crisis. They are crying out for help. People are asking for rapid action. And in light of that, I would like to make another comment reflecting more on the internal mechanisms of the European Union and picking up on something that you've been saying since 2019. In my country, we say that only stupid people can't change their minds. I think the European Commission has to look at how many proposals from the pillars of the 2019 programs and look at what needs to be changed, what needs to be reviewed. If you look at the world since 2019, since these plans and programs were put together, the world has changed entirely. And we know that that world is not going to come back. We're not going to go back in time. So on the Green Deal and other trade policies, Europe and the Commission are going to have to be pragmatic and look at the fact that the situation is different. You need to have a long-sighted view and understand that conditions have changed and that some plans cannot be implemented anymore. These plans have not helped to protect the climate. They have not helped with an economic, socio-economic or industrial transition, and that's what we need so desperately right now. Thank you.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you very much, President. President von der Leyen. On behalf of the ECR group, I would also like to wish a warm welcome and offer my full support to Mrs. Zelenska. At this moment in time, it's important that we send out a clear message from this plenary for support to Ukraine. Your State of the Union address this year is probably the most difficult one that you have made in recent years. The context is very complex, not only because of what's happening in the present days, but because we have a difficult period behind us, first the pandemic and then the outbreak of war. So I think it's important that in these circumstances we need to clearly condemn the actions of Russia and the behavior of Russia. We have full support and solidarity in facts and in words with Ukraine, in our everyday actions on behalf of the government and the European institutions. It's very important to work hard right now, because the issue of Europe's defence and foreign affairs policy has to be transformed, particularly with the transatlantic alliance, where we need to bolster the relationship with Europe's countries. We now need to provide full support to the difficult path that we have taken on sanctions. Only sanctions can bring results, and at the same time, we need to look at our daily lives. We need to act with unity and in a timely manner. Mrs. von der Leyen, we need genuine unity and not just a facade of unity. We need to intervene to support households and companies. That's essential in taking on the crisis we have before us. We need clear answers. A gas price cap is one of those clear answers, and uncoupling the gas price from the energy price in general. I'll give you a clear example, a specific example of the kind of speculation we face and the need to intervene. Over the last few days, on the 9th of September, we saw a Council of European Energy Ministers who sent out a positive and clear signal. But immediately after, on the 12th of September, the gas price went below 200 euros. On the 26th of August, it was over 330 euros. But now gas prices are increasing again, because the message that the markets are getting from the EU is not strong enough. We need a strong answer now. Member states need to be conscious of the difficulties that we have ahead of us. So we need to act in a timely manner. All of the planning, the cohesion planning for the 2022 to 2027 period, the recovery plan, a lot of this will depend on what happens now, because the planning was done before the outbreak of war. We need to work with conviction towards ensuring we have genuine unity within the EU. I've listened carefully to declarations from other colleagues around the plenary, the presidents of the other groups. I understand there's a need for political polemics to go on because of national elections that are upcoming in many countries, but that's not the path we should be following. I'd like to thank the support that we've had for Ukrainian refugees. The two ladies who are with us today have set an excellent example. But you have to remember that there are countries like Poland who have opened their arms wide. They have shown exceptional efforts in terms of welcoming refugees escaping from Ukraine. We need to be conscious that unity it cannot be achieved by seeking conflicts. It has to be true and substantial. The rule of law is important, but we cannot allow the debate on rule of law to be contaminated by ideological issues. That brings nothing positive. Colleagues, over the coming months, we will be working on a lot of issues together in our common interest. We don't need this kind of political polemics. It shows immaturity and a sense of irresponsibility. We want a serious Europe that is capable of working together with national governments. That is the path we should be following. In this context, I hope that we can find a good, balanced approach. Democracy isn't just for when it suits you. It's not just for when people vote the way you want them to vote. Whether we lose or whether you win an election, you have to respect the citizens' mandate to its politicians. That's the only way we can have a serious and credible Europe that can take on the challenges of the future. Thank you.
Grazie, Onorevole Fitto. Now I give the floor to Manon Aubry on behalf of the Left Group.
Madame la Présidente von der Leyen, chers...
Madam President von der Leyen, colleagues, Madam Zelenska, we've heard a general policy speech, and the objective must be to look after the interests and respond to the concerns of Europe's citizens. And I've come here with the bills that people have asked me to show you. This bill from Gregory, it's a gas bill, €2,130. People who are worried about not being able to heat their homes this winter. And there are millions of people like Grégoire and Brigitte. The prices are skyrocketing, and it's not just energy prices. The prices are rising, people's salaries are stagnating, and yet shareholders are cashing in. There are those who have plenty, a handful of billionaires jetting around the planet, and others are out on the golf courses, which have to be watered while everyone else is in sweltering heat. But there are other people too. And the crisis is not just a result of the terrible war in Ukraine and Putin's blackmail. This crisis has happened because we have an economic system that does not work, as you have had to admit today. Let's start with taxing mega profits. And for the first time, you've accepted that multinationals are making mega profits. Please tell Bruno Le Maire, our Minister of Finance and the Economy, who doesn't seem to have noticed. This House has been asking for the taxation of mega profits, and it's good to see that there are people listening. And I'm glad that we're winning this cultural battle. I congratulate your linguistic creativity. I can imagine you looked in a dictionary of synonyms to avoid the word mega profits. Your reference was to exceptional profits. But this shouldn't just be about fossil fuels. It should be all of the companies that have benefited from the crisis, be it the shipping sector, be it the banking sector, be it the luxury goods sector. It shouldn't just be energy companies that are taxed. I see at the end of your term of office, you're extolling the virtues of the market. And yet we have a crisis. The European Union is having to cross its collective fingers in the hope that we won't all be having blackouts this winter, that we'll have heat and light. Your model has failed. Your measures are not enough. We have to stop the prices rising. It's good that you've realized past mistakes, but you need consistency for the future. And you didn't say much about the climate today. We've had the hottest summer in history in Europe. And here you go with your free trade agreements. The planet is burning, and yet you want to import milk from the other side of the world through your trade agreements with the likes of New Zealand. I'm afraid we have to do better in protecting the natural world. It was the same with the pandemic. There was a quick initial response and then a quick return to business as usual. And you're talking about reforming the budget. You talked about convention on the reform of the treaties, but you've ignored the findings of the Conference on the Future of Europe. There just isn't time to keep kicking the can down the road. In fact, you're a prisoner of a liberal world view which is collapsing around you. It's a great pity that the right of this House is aligning itself with the far right. The right has chosen its side. We are on the side of solidarity. And President von der Leyen, how many more crises is it going to take before you really learn the lessons of this failure?
Thomas Deutsch.
Tisztelt kollégák, először engedjenek meg egy...
Dear colleagues, let me just say something to Manon Aubry. In Hungary, the socialists who belong to the SD group, the liberal groups, and the political parties belonging to the Green group have been in a close political alliance with the anti-Semitic political party called Jobbik. So, if you are against cooperation with the extreme political forces, then you'd better look at your own courtyard first. Madam President, we Hungarians have suffered German and Soviet occupation, so we know all too well what it means to fight aggression, to fight for independence. As the son of Holocaust survivors, I understand the cruel destruction of war. We all stand with those under attack. When the sanctions were adopted at the beginning of the summer, the Commission told us that these sanctions would bring Russia to its knees. You promised us that sanctions will hurt Russia, not European citizens. You promised us that sanctions will end the war. The end of the war is nowhere in sight, while energy prices continue to skyrocket. All this time, Russia happily pockets windfall profits from the energy markets. The sanctions have brought us galloping inflation, which pushes Europeans into poverty, while Russia is getting richer. Europe faces an energy shortage and energy crisis. Madam President, this is not what the Commission promised us when you introduced the sanctions.
The floor back to the President of the Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. And first of all, I want to thank all the presidents of the groups for the broad coalition supporting the proposals of solidarity for the vulnerable households and companies. And yes, we know time is of the essence. But when I look at Madame Aubry, the bills you have shown to us, yes, in French you would say, ils sont insupportables. This is right. But you know what? Send those bills to Moscow. That's where they belong to. That's where the source is. I have a plea to this Parliament. you all rightly so say, speed, speed, speed. Time is of the essence. You've done phenomenal things with the digital COVID certificate. Please do that again with Repower EU. Because you're all rightly so calling for investment for renewables, also cross-border projects. Here are more than 300 billion euros that could be invested to cross-border projects. You're calling for the permitting process that it has to be sped up. Well, the permitting process, the reform is in Repower EU. You're calling for stabilizing the ETS prices. It's in Repower EU and 20 billion fresh money. So please speed up. I have the same call and plea to the European Council and the Member States. Please speed up because we really need you to do again a miracle like in the COVID times. Now, Stéphane Séjourné, you're right, we must call out Putin's lies, and I want to look at the issue of food. Nothing in our sanctions prevents Russia from exporting food and fertilizers to vulnerable countries. We have to say that over and over again because it's the truth. And Russia just says the opposite, which is a lie. Russia has blocked Ukrainian harbors, a very simple truth. And our solidarity lanes, together with the UN deal that was really helpful, have now enabled that more than 10 million tons of grains have left Ukraine. Today, 30% of Ukraine's grain exports are going to low and middle income countries in Africa, Middle East and Asia. So it's Ukraine's grain that has made prices drop again. Prices for maize and wheat have decreased by 20%. They're almost back to pre-war levels. So we should be very clear in our messaging. Fact is, Putin has created the food crisis. Europe and the United Nations are working to put an end to that. That's the truth. And on agriculture, Europe is a top agri-food producer and exporter, and that's a great pride. And it gives us special responsibility in times when so many countries simply don't have enough food. This is why, as you know, we have decided to allow the cultivation of any crops on set-aside land for the next harvesting season. We know that farmers are also coping with high prices for energy and for fertilizers, and therefore less than a month into the war, we triggered for the very first time the crisis reserve under the Common Agriculture Policy. This frees up to 500 million euros for the most affected farming sectors, and Member States can top this up with another 1.4 billion euros for European rural development funds. Keep in mind, Member States can also use the revenues from the solidarity contribution we just put on the table as a proposal of the oil and gas companies to support fertilizer production in Europe. But finally, and again this goes for the whole energy crisis, there's one simple truth that applies to both energy and fertilizers. The more we save, the less we pay, and the less fossil fuel-based fertilizers we use, the less dependent we are on fossil fuel imports. In the last months, globally but also across Europe, each and every one of us felt more clearly than ever before the immense impact of the global climate crisis, and you've mentioned it all. The heat records, the heavy rain events, the floods, the devastating droughts destroying crop and livelihoods. They urge us to move more swiftly than ever together. We need a resilient and sustainable agriculture that preserves biodiversity and, above all, the healthy, fertile soil. And that can cushion all the aforementioned disasters. Therefore, our discussions on chemical pesticides and mineral fertilizers are crucial, using the natural resources entrusted to us in a careful and preserving way. Many thanks.
Thank you very much. I give the floor now on behalf of the Council, the Minister of European Affairs, Mikuláš Bek.
Thank you. Thank you very much. President Metsola, President von der Leyen,
Honourable members, ladies and gentlemen, let me start by thanking you, President von der Leyen, on behalf of the Council for your cooperation and leadership in these uncertain and challenging times that Europe is witnessing since Russia launched its war of aggression against Ukraine and its people. Russia is fighting not only against Ukraine, but also against our values and principles. For this reason, the Czech presidency will never cease to support Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity using all the means at the EU's disposal, which includes, inter alia, providing all the political, military, economic and humanitarian assistance that Ukraine may need. The challenges we face are manifold, and their combined impacts are taking a high toll on our populations, especially the most vulnerable, and on our economies. These challenges also present risks for our ambitious EU agenda. We need to address the immediate challenges while keeping our long-term goals very much in mind. It's no easy task. President von der Leyen, you have given us a lot of food for thought. You have addressed the most pressing issues that require our full collective attention, and the Council will no doubt give its political support to meeting these objectives. President von der Leyen, in a number of your previous speeches, you referred to Czech President Václav Havel, and I thank you for that. And indeed, as Václav Havel once said, the task ahead of Europe deserves careful and thorough reflection. Madam President, you can count on our presidency to help you rethink, rebuild and repower Europe. Addressing this hemicycle in July, Prime Minister Fiala outlined our priorities, which largely align with yours. The most urgent tasks are to address the various dimensions of the war on Ukraine, bring genuine energy security, strengthen Europe's defence capabilities, secure the strategic resilience of the EU economy, and ensure the resilience of our democratic institutions. Energy security and mitigating high energy prices is our most pressing task. I welcome that the Commission is today following up with its proposals on some of the measures discussed by the Council last week. We are determined to work around the clock on these proposals and reach an agreement among the Member States at the next meeting of Energy Ministers scheduled for the 30th of September. However, the situation we are facing is very difficult, and complex European response is necessary. Therefore, we welcome the Commission's intention to come up with further measures in the following weeks. All of this we have to keep in mind while not forgetting about our long-term goals, namely the green and digital transitions. And of course, we will also follow up on the recommendations of the Conference on the Future of Europe. The Council will do its utmost to progress at pace on the many initiatives already on the table and on the new ones to come. Finally, we welcome the Commission's letter of intent, which the Council will discuss next week, together with the annual foresight report. We look forward to continuing the dialogue among the three institutions on our common priorities for the next year. The Council will then, in November, discuss the new Commission work programme with a view to the next joint declaration on legislative priorities. Our joint programming can help us and our three institutions achieve results in a focused and targeted way. Let me reaffirm the Council's commitment to this process and assure you that the Presidency will continue to be a determined and sincere partner. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Beck. We go now to the colleagues, starting with Siegfried Mureşan for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, President von der Leyen, dear colleagues. We are all witnessing this year the people of Ukraine standing up for European values. We admire their resistance, their fighting spirit, and we are inspired by this here in the European Parliament, and millions of citizens are inspired across the European Union. Wanting to live in freedom, in democracy, deciding one's own future, this means defending European values. Ukraine has a European path. We here in the European Parliament are convinced of this. We have done all we could for the people of Ukraine since the beginning of the crisis, and we will continue to do so. This is why, President von der Leyen, long before EU accession will be possible, we support what you have presented today on working towards bringing Ukraine closer to the single market of the European Union, because that means freedom of movement for people, for goods, for services, for capital. It will mean the European Union and Ukraine growing closer together, more possibilities to rebuild Ukraine and to develop Ukraine. We shall support this initiative, firstly. Secondly, more measures and quicker measures to support citizens in the European Union. Capping energy prices, including prices on imported Russian gas. Using existing funds for energy interconnectivity, for energy efficiency, for reducing dependency, and for investing in renewables. This is what Repower EU is about. We are finalizing, President, dear colleagues, work here in the European Parliament to make sure that money flows where it is needed fast. But as President von der Leyen, you have announced new measures today. We shall also work together on revising the budget of the European Union. We want to do more. We need to make sure that in all of those areas we have money. To conclude, Madam President, we also have a duty to make the European Union safer. We have enlarged NATO because Finland and Sweden wanted to join, and because they fulfilled the criteria. We should do the same for the Schengen area. For many years, Romania and Bulgaria are fulfilling the conditions, and Croatia now fulfills them as well. We in the Parliament have a clear position. The Commission has a clear position. We shall be united in pushing the Council to doing this, because enlarging Schengen means more security for all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Muresan. Simona Bonafè now for 1 minute.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you, President. We are facing another serious crisis in Europe, one that is having a huge effect on our families and companies that are caught in the grip of rising electric bills and inflation. Like for the pandemic, we can't just stand by watching as families grow poorer. In the hardest times, Europe must act as Europe, and we must focus on European shared interests. When the pandemic hit the hardest, there were those who worked towards the ideology of sovereignty and held up our ideas of solidarity and shared destiny. We need to put an end to Europe of inertia. President von der Leyen, I listened to your words on the future that lies ahead of us, on the measures that we need now to tackle the crisis. A full reform of energy markets and new resources for businesses. However, we have to act boldly. We can't waste any more time in putting a cap on gas prices. That's the only thing that put an end to this dreadful speculation that we're seeing at the moment. Europe will have a shared destiny, or there will be no Europe. You were right, Madam von der Leyen. Our unity is our true strength, and divided we are condemned to fail. Thank you.
Next is Malik Asmani for 2 minutes.
Dear President Metsola, dear Vice President von der Leyen, dear Commissioners and dear colleagues, I want to start by praising the people of Ukraine for their enduring bravery and commitment to freedom. Colleagues, the progress they have made shows our aid and assistance to Ukraine is working. The EU must supply the weapons Ukraine needs to keep their momentum. Let's communicate directly to the people of Europe about who is responsible for the cost of living crisis. Madam President, the origin of high inflation points to one man. We have the cost of Putin's crisis. His reckless actions have driven up everyday energy and food costs. for households and businesses. In the short term, we must do what is necessary to limit the economic shock we are facing. Europe's small businesses cannot be left to pay unsustainable bills for the maniac in the Kremlin. They are the backbone of our economy, Madam President, so please make sure your proposals focus on them too. That is why Renew Europe has set out a plan for an energy shield and a food security strategy, and act we must. However, let us be mindful of unintended consequences. Remember that, ultimately, the market knows best how to allocate resources. Reform the market, yes. Disfigure the market, no, thank you. Madam President, the extreme weather we have seen also this summer shows the importance of the green transition. We have the chance to transform our economy and deliver millions of new jobs by harnessing new technologies. A temporary energy crisis is no justification to undermine the Green Deal. And finally, on migration, we need to act, Ms. von der Leyen, not only with arguments about the advantages of migration, but our citizens expect that we are in control of migration. And if a package approach doesn't work, then we need to decouple and start with some important files, like screening at external border, and strengthen also more our efforts on the external dimension. If we do not act, Ms. von der Leyen, we will see more Melonies on the European stage. And that is our common responsibility to prevent. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Asmani. And now for 1.5 minutes, Jordi Soler.
Madam President, confronted with a Russian invasion of Ukraine, the EU has provided a firm and united response. We rightly decided to stand with the Ukrainian people in the face of this criminal aggression. We did the right thing. We have to be with those defending democracy, freedom, and ultimately what we like to call European values. But it should be remembered, as you did in your speech, that within our European Union, these same values cannot, at all times and in all places, be taken for granted either. That here too, it is necessary to defend every day respect for fundamental rights and democracy, although, luckily in our case, not with the force of arms, because we do indeed have problems in this regard, and not all of them are caused by threats coming from the outside. When in some member states we are spied on by the hacking of our phones, as has happened to me and other colleagues in this Parliament, we have a serious problem. When political and judicial abuses committed in member states must be called out by international organizations, as it recently happened to Spain, we have a problem. When the rule of law continues to deteriorate in some member states and we don't fully use the mechanism to correct that situation, we also have a problem. So, Madam von der Leyen, I kindly ask you for more courage to protect, defend and improve the state of democracy and the respect for fundamental rights in our Union. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Soler. Maintenant, Jordan Bardella pour 1 minute et demie.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam President, President of the Commission. Well, here we are. The people of Europe are in trouble. The energy emergency has been declared. The war is part of it, but there's more to the high prices that we're paying right now. Well, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. We have dependence on fossil energy that has placed us in the hands of Russia, the petro monarchies of the Gulf and China. This is an absurd and irrational war against nuclear energy that the Greens are leading. We are giving money to the Russians as a result. Their revenue from oil is growing exponentially, and we're now trying to replace it with American shale gas. We're putting us in the hands of Azerbaijan, which is now attacking the population of Armenia. Well, social Europe, we're now preparing rationing for Europe's citizens who are afraid of the coming winter. You have renounced sovereignty and plunged our people into distress, facing the kind of emergencies that we thought we'd put behind us in history. So, taxing the windfall tax and supporting nuclear, these are all essential measures for trying to get back to economic normality. Europe's peoples are angry. The time will come soon before you will have to stand before a judge and say, what have you done to the European dream? Thank you.
Beata Szydło for 2 minutes, please.
Pani Przewodnicząca, Pani Przewodnicząca.
Madam President, ladies and gentlemen. We heard something quite important from President von der Leyen today. She mentioned that it was a mistake not to have listened to Poland and what Poland was saying about EU policy on Russia. I'm glad we heard those words. But I wonder if this is for real and we really do want to build a better European Union of solidarity. Did we just hear President von der Leyen say that only to go back to business as usual, or is this really a new way of thinking? We've heard about the need to defend democracy and the rule of law in various EU member states. Yes, the EU must defend democracy and the rule of law. But why is it that we hear this from the socialist group, from the liberal group? Why are most of these people French? And why are they only talking about democracy and the rule of law in Hungary? So what kind of democracy are we talking about? Is this German democracy? Manfred Weber is talking about supporting Donald Tusk, interfering in the Polish elections. Shouldn't democracy be about respecting the choices of voters in other countries? What kind of rule of law are we talking about? Are we talking about the kind of rule of law which respects our treaties and the constitutions of member states? Or are we talking about the kind of rule of law that suits the Germans, the French, the rich people with a particular view of the world? We need solidarity and unity. There is a war going on the other side of our border. We have to unite. We have to build solidarity to stand up to Putin. We have to learn the lessons from the past. There are people in this chamber who've supported Putin, who've supported Russia. A former chancellor of Germany was a supporter of Putin and Russian energy policy. That is why, ladies and gentlemen, we need to show more respect for each other and we need to reflect on what solidarity means.
Madam President, I am very concerned about the times we're living in. In my country, Sweden, we see a new government being built with the support of a right-wing nationalist and racist party. And at the turn of the year, it will be my country, Sweden, that will be taking on the EU presidency. It's a shame for the EU's climate policy to be dependent upon climate denialists. The government in the presidency country is depending on a party that cannot respond when they're asked whether they support Macron or Putin. Well, I may not be a fan of Macron, to say the least, but I would always know what side I would pick. We need to do more to stop the right-wing extremists and the far right in Europe. We need to work on the climate, and we in the left will call for a policy on the climate that relies on researchers and not on the climate denialists. We need strong measures against Poland and Hungary that are trampling on the rule of law and fundamental rights. We need a lively civil society and an independent judicial system. That is not a luxury, that's a basic. Women's right to abortion, that women should decide over their own bodies. We will be standing up also for LGBTQI people's rights. And Serbia, a candidate country, is trying to ban a pride march. That is unacceptable. Russia's war against the Ukraine is a terrible war, but it also places demands upon us. Of course, we need to introduce renewable energy to make ourselves independent from Putin, but we also need to reshape the energy markets. I welcome the proposals that you've made. We need to tax the energy companies much more strongly than we have done to date. There is no time to lose. Not a minute to waste. I hope that you, unlike the Swedish right, will not be relying on the support of the far right, because then we won't be able to stand up for the climate. We won't be able to stand up for democratic rights. We won't be able to stand up for the welfare state. And we will not be able to stand up for those we need to bequeath a sustainable Europe to.
Begin for 1 minute. Prego.
Grazie, Presidente Metsola.
Thank you, President Metsola, President von der Leyen, colleagues. If we were to think of a symbol of the EU during the pandemic, it was the wards full of COVID patients, but today it's this. This is an electricity bill that a small businessman has received for August. Over 5,000 euros compared with about 1.5 last year, over triple the price. And because of this, a lot of business people have already had to stop their work. Many more will have to do it, and lots of families aren't going to be able to make ends meet at the end of the month. And facing this, we can't just have unproductive summits and more words. We have to act. President von der Leyen, do you remember the meeting with President Conte? That is the model that you should take as your inspiration. The recovery fund is the pole star that we have to follow during this energy crisis. Now, of course, other measures are going to be required, shared storage, caps on gas prices. But don't take advice from the Draghi government, because the work that has been done in Italy is not right. We need this money now, and it's our citizens and our businesses that need this money.
It is Francis Fitzgerald for 1 minute.
Europe today is facing crisis, with war once again on our continent. But Europe has increasingly responded well to crisis, and our determination to do so again is unwavering. People and governments are looking to the EU now more than ever to see how we can tackle those global problems. We know what they are: energy prices, climate change, cost of living, inflation, job creation. Announcements are important, but now the EU must act decisively. Thank you, President, for your leadership. But we now need a commitment from all our member states to implement all of these issues without delay. Use the funding, as the President has said, that is there. I welcome the supports that have been announced for families and SMEs. SMEs are at the heart of our economies. We know they are the job creators in our member states. Only by working together, EU and member states, can we ensure that the worst impacts of Putin's winter can be avoided. This should not be about a battle of competencies, but a commitment to deliver. Our citizens are waiting. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fitzgerald. Issa naddi l-kelma lill-Alex.
Mr. Alex Saliba for 1 minute. European citizens are now looking to us for solutions to the economic and social crisis we are going through. The action we will take today will determine the state of the European Union for tomorrow. High energy prices, high food prices, galloping inflation, negative consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic, more unemployment, less spending power for our families, more poverty and greater social inequality. This is only a small part of a broader problem we are facing, a problem that will affect many people in the coming years and that will bring with it dramatic consequences for the most vulnerable members of our society. So I believe that we need a European reinsurance scheme that will fight against unemployment, that will protect employment and our workers. We need to protect people who are living in poverty, people with disabilities, our youth, our elderly people, people who are unemployed, those who are working for no salary, platform workers who have no protection and no rights. Thank you, Mr. Ajus Saliba.
1 minute.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Madam President, well, difficult moments in Europe, indeed. How to continue helping Ukraine and at the same time how to mitigate the energy crisis in Europe. Households are struggling to pay the energy bills, doctors to close their practices, industries preparing massive redundancies. There is a French, German, Spanish way how to deal with this crisis. It's time to decide what we must do at European level to help citizens in their current struggle and those industries heavily affected. Some companies will receive state aid in one country, while the same sector in another country will not. We need to ensure a fair, level playing field for all affected sectors in Europe. Winter is coming. We need solidarity, common rules, targeted help for affected businesses and, above all, for our citizens. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sharansova. Maintenant, David Corman pour 1 minute.
Madame la Présidente.
President, thank you for your speech and thank you for the homage you paid to the Greens and environmentalists, referring to the actions of the 1970s. Madam President, in the efforts that we're going to have to make for the green transition that we want to see, we need to have the financial means for that. And there's a fundamental political question here. When you want to finance change, you have to ask your question, who is going to pay? Now, you have put forward an exceptional tax on super profits, but we need to look at profits in general and financial transactions and so forth. You know that for the recovery plan and perhaps future recovery plans, we have been discussing a fair taxation. And to do that, we need your support to ensure that member states will work together. Also, you said that we were visionaries 40 years ago, and now we are asking you to understand that hydrogen is not the magic recipe to solve all of our problems. We want to focus on developing renewable energies in a decentralized manner. Thank you very much.
Merci, Monsieur Cormand. Next is Gunnar Beck for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, President. Commission President, we expected a speech on the State of the Union and got one on Ukraine, the blessings of public debt, the green religion and the fantasy economy. Tatsächlich.
What we see, in fact, is in the EU we've got stagflation. 9% inflation and the lowest growth in the developed world. For Germany, the IFO Institute is forecasting a recession and an inflation rate of over 10%. At the same time, in Switzerland, they have 3.5% inflation and 2.6% real growth. Well, that shows that hyperinflation is avoidable and solid growth in Europe is still possible. Our stagflation is not a consequence of COVID or the war in Ukraine, but rather it's homemade through badly thought through sanctions and the Green Deal that has made energy unaffordable and has zero influence on the world climate. So now the EU Migration Pact is going to pull thousands of millions of migrants to us. every individual migrant costs us, according to a Danish study, more than 600,000 euros. Well, the ECB is just going to print more money for that. The increase in the monetary mass and the fall in the euro's value are just going to lead to more inflation. Well, if anyone asks me what we should do, I always say it's simple. Just do the absolute opposite of what German governments and the EU Commission have been doing for years now. That would be the cheapest recovery plan and the only possible future for next generation EU.
Thank you, Mr. Beck. Next is Robert Zīle, Vice President. For your floor. The floor is yours, 1.5 minutes.
Madam President, Madam von der Leyen, to start with, I must say that this was the best of the State of the Union speech that I've heard here during the numerous years I've been in this House, but only in that part which gives the quick actions that we have to take. And you said that in this complicated situation we have to do certain things, and I think that in this part you tried not to please too much various political forces in this House. This is a year of awakening when most of Europe was in deep sleep with eyes wide shut. We have to open the eyes and have to understand that the situation has changed, and we have to strengthen our threshold of pain. A few years ago, we made energy union, but instead of that, it resulted in new pipeline to Russia, and it hurts many. I would like to say that your program in respect of energy market is acceptable, and I urge you to take fast steps and to negotiate, to talk with the member states and ensure that this doesn't destroy the single energy market that we have. Before the war in Ukraine, we started building the strategic compass, but the war in Ukraine and the Ukrainian reliance mainly on our transatlantic partners and its European neighbors, I think, in my opinion, it makes us rethink the direction of this compass. And also the expansion of NATO shows where this security needle of the compass points to. That's why I urge you to focus on the most important and the crucially decisive things, and let's not waste our time on unimportant stuff.
Dear Roberts, can I ask you to pause? Do I see that Ms. Grappini has a blue card for you? Ms. Grappini, will you take it? Okay, Ms. Grappini, you have the floor. Roberts, you can come back to the lectern to answer.
And to listen to the translation.
Oh, we'll need to get you. Yeah, there it is.
Da, mulțumesc foarte mult. Stimate coleg, ați spus că discursul legat de starea națiunii.
Colleagues, you said that the State of the Union address is an important moment in time before this Parliament, and has been marked by the desire of the President. That's true. We're talking about 25 million people living on a minimum wage. As we look forward to 2030, 2035, how can we project ourselves forward without forgetting reality, given the rhythm with which decisions are taken and then put into practice? They're taking a considerable period of time. We're entering into the winter period. What can be done in concrete terms for our citizens?
So please, can that be fixed while...
I think I catch the point in English. So, of course, there are difficult and it was very painful time. But while my group and also my political views is always that everybody, all ruling like governments and EU level should do their own work on this crisis situation. For example, I think that this mostly should be done to decrease this pain level by national governments, and at the same time, European Union level should take responsibilities to keep it in a balance, in a joint actions in a single market and energy problems. That's my ideal combination how we can solve this crisis. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vice President. Next is Lefteris Nicolaou Alavanos for 1 minute.
The speech of our presidents was a military delirium. European monopolies are using in many ways this imperialistic war, sanctions against Russia, and now they're putting themselves in position to reconstruct, in quotation mark, the Ukraine. Our people should not have to take sides in this imperialistic war, in this competition between the US, NATO, EU with Russia and China. And this pretend European solution is a blackmail to the people. Pay or freeze. But you know, inflation started a lot before the war because of your green transition, because of the deregulation of energy, delignitization, the companies that are all the more profitable, and you know, you can't say that the energy multinationals are going to share their profits with people. This is capitalist exploitation, and these crises are all getting worse. Refugees, wars. So what we need is this energy, which is going to be a social good, not something to be traded, and it's owned by the people, and of course leaving the EU.
Senhora Presidente do Parlamento, Presidente von der Leyen.
President of the Parliament, President von der Leyen. First of all, I would like to express our solidarity to Ukraine, and I would like to very much welcome your initiative to invite the First Lady from Ukraine to come along to the session today to express our solidarity with Ukraine and the Ukrainian people. And I would like to thank very much the commitment that you have made for this work on behalf of the EPP, because obviously in order to be prepared for the challenges of the future, we need this kind of support from you. Now, during the course of your speech on the State of the Union this morning, on a number of occasions, you've made reference to the errors we've made in the past, which have led to this dependence on Russia. And you've said that the member states and the European Union didn't necessarily hear or listen to properly certain heads of state and governments from certain member states. If you take a look at the interconnection pipe between the Iberian Peninsula and France, President Macron is refusing that interconnector. Is the European Commission going to be complicit in this once again? The Prime Minister, Antonio Costa, has met President Macron, but he's not managed to persuade him to accept this interconnector pipe. And we're seeing that France is refusing progress. So are we going to make the same mistake, repeat the mistake we made with Nord Stream 2, and have that kind of energy dependency? We've got excellent solutions elsewhere as well, in Greece and Italy, but the Iberian Peninsula could provide this response to the energy situation. So how's the European Commission going to reply to Mr. Macron?
Muito obrigado, Presidente, cara Presidente.
Yes, thank you very much, President. President of the Commission, dear colleagues. Over the past few months, and in the face of the invasion of Ukraine, our citizens have responded on the basis of solidarity. Today, we can get a greater feeling of this war in Europe, and we have to make sure that the solidarity shown by our citizens towards Ukraine does not lose in strength. President von der Leyen, we've been talking, you referred to social protection. Yes, we do have to make progress there. Progress has been made in Portugal and Spain. And in the case of energy, we see that some of the prices have been brought down. So that is a partial response. We can see that the Commission is trying to make progress, but the Council is dragging its feet. At the same time, we've seen that energy bills are really making families suffer, and industry and business as well. We need to be protected from the effects of unemployment, and we want a future without populism. And we really have to act now so that the winter does not freeze the hopes and expectations of our Europeans.
For 1 minute.
Sehr geehrte Präsidentinnen.
President, the State of the Union couldn't be more tense. Putin's waging a war and an energy war against Europe as a whole, and we need to be sort of clever and united. Otherwise, I think we're going to slide into a winter of rage. All sources of energy are important when it comes to avoiding sort of social disruption. We need all available energy sources. Sidestepping nuclear is wrong and unrealistic. Energy is going to be clean but affordable throughout society in order to counter market disruptions in the crisis. That's true, but Madam von der Leyen, we're not going to get a carte blanche in order to sort of intervene in the single market endlessly. That wouldn't be an emergency economy, but a planned economy. We need a cap on electricity for a limited period of time. We need network infrastructure, and we need to open up strategic energy sources such as fusion. But Europe needs a very different kind of energy, an energy for reform, a reform of fiscal rules, tighter fiscal rules, without adding to the debt mountain. We need reform for the EU, and that is a promise that you made, Madam President of the Commission. It's for you now to act on that promise. We are expecting concrete steps towards a convention in order to make Europe fit, and not only for the coming winter.
And next is Heidi Hautala for 1 minute.
Dear President von der Leyen, you mentioned that through trade policy we can not only strengthen our economy but also promote shared values with like-minded countries. And 1 year ago you made the important announcement the EU will put in place a ban on imports of goods made with forced labour. And I understand that the Commission is now expected to publish its proposal for such a law in a couple of hours. Could you confirm this? There are 50 million modern slaves in the world today, and the majority of them work in the global value chains, with often a European consumer at the end of the chain. We must do everything to ensure that the EU or its companies are not complicit in supporting state-sponsored or other forced labour. It's very important that when violations do happen, effective remedy to victims needs to take place. Dear President, finally, the report finally released by the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michel Bachelet, is yet another proof of horrendous abuses, including massive forced labour amounting to, at the very least, crimes against humanity in Xinjiang. Will you make sure that the EU enforces an effective regime alongside the US and other global partners before even the conclusion of further trade agreements? Thank you.
I give the floor next to Gerolf Annemans for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam President.
I've been hearing in recent days and months that more and more people seem to be placing our hopes in the European Union. I'm not sure if this works in English, but in Dutch we have an expression for this. It's like going to confess to the devil. In our language, what we mean by this is that victims throw themselves into the arms of those who've caused their problems. Since the financial crisis, the European Union has almost doubled money supply, which directly led to this explosion of inflation. For years now, we've been talking about the Green Deal, closing down nuclear power stations, cutting off energy supplies. This has led directly to the explosion of energy prices, which was already underway well before the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And with its so-called reset concepts, sustainable development and building back better rubbish, the European Union has further promoted the deindustrialization of our continent and the collapse of small and medium-sized businesses and farmers. At the same time, we've been forcing through more and more immigration and destroying elements of our culture, such as the social system. This means people must finally wake up. The European Union is not the solution. It's actually the biggest cause of the problems. Thank you, Madam President. Ms von der Leyen, ministers, colleagues, Commission. We're talking today about the state of the Union, the European Union, and obviously the current state is crisis, an energy crisis. For many years now, the European Commission and the Parliament have been sabotaging nuclear power and making it impossible for us to produce our own fossil fuels. We're expected to rely on unreliable wind and solar craft. Winter's coming and we're blaming Russia, but there's been a total lack of careful thought about this. Our voters are suffering from an income crisis. Inflation is now in double figures, which means that savers' money is going up in smoke. There's no solution to this from the European Union. All of this is part of a much larger crisis, which is a crisis of national sovereignty. With practically all the problems which the European Union is currently wrestling with, they're all caused by the federalist ideology of the European Commission. European Union has become an aim per se. Everything should be green. And the citizens are simply an obstacle in the road for the European Commission. We talked about trade. We have to find our own solutions. What works for Netherlands doesn't necessarily work for Portugal and vice versa. But that's no longer possible to recognise that in the European Union. The European Union is drawing more and more powers to itself. Euro-federalism has been leading us from one crisis to another. We can no longer carry on like this. We really have to come to a time when we have to move back to a Europe comprised of sovereign nations.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Madame la Présidente, vous avez dit...
Thank you, President. President, you said it was a battle between autocracy and democracy. Yes, well, that's how we would describe the combat. You recalled the words of President Sassoli, who said that democracy has to be updated. And here we're talking about a crime, a war outside. But unfortunately, you didn't mention the very serious threats from inside the European Union. You didn't remind or recall that democracy obviously has to apply to citizens, politicians, journalists, etc., where it's under threat, as is the case in Spain and Greece. And democracy has to respect the rulings of the courts, which is not the case in Spain, where 61% of court rulings are not being respected. Democracy, we need democracy to fight autocracy, but we have to do this from the inside as well, and this is not really all that clear, especially when we see that some of your commissioners have photographs taken together with members of the extreme right, and then we see politicians being spied on.
A minute to Daniel Kaspari.
Ein Entlastungspaket für kleine und mittelständische Unternehmen.
A relief package for SMEs, an offensive external trade strategy in securing sources of raw materials. Thank you, Madam President, for your concrete proposals that are encouraging. But I think as Parliament, what we need to do is send a message that we're tackling burdens on society, the zero pollution package, the various health plans, the supply chain legislation, and ladies and gentlemen, citizens are already facing major challenges. They need more room, more breathing space. We have got to guard against further strains on society. Please take these issues seriously. We are doing what we can to avoid them. Life is becoming more and more expensive. We're talking about plant protection measures, 3 million hectares, various million tons of cereal less will be produced in the future. That will exacerbate the position. I wonder whether you might not want to reflect on withdrawing that proposal in this difficult time. We want more local agriculture, more crops being produced, and not the contrary.
Tack, fru talman, kommissionens ordförande.
Yes, thank you, President. President of the Commission. Crisis, climate, pandemic, the Russian war in Ukraine, and now an energy crisis as well. So crises which require common shared solutions, political courage and real leadership. And I'm expecting that the Commission will be able to assume all of these challenges. Support and solidarity for Ukraine, this has to be continued, and it's important that women and children, that we pay special attention to them. And we've welcomed this good news on rebuilding schools in Ukraine, but looking ahead to the winter, we also need some kind of measures in order to bring down the extremely high energy prices in the European Union, the member states. But this doesn't mean that we should stop our efforts when it comes to the climate transition. And more than ever, I think at this moment, the European Union has to act as a guarantor for democracy and stability in these difficult times.
Mrs. Giverhofstadt for 1 minute.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. C'est dommage que Monsieur...
Thank you, Madam President. It's a real shame that Mr. Badella is no longer with us. He really has a cheek to have said what he said this morning. To attack the President of the Commission, saying that she's to blame for inflation, price increases. Everybody knows it's the war in Ukraine, launched by Putin, and him and his friends have spent years supporting and sympathizing with Putin. He really has got a cheek. And maybe somebody's paying him. I don't know what's on the Americans' list. I wouldn't be surprised if Miss Le Pen's name and other members of the Rassemblement National were to figure on that list because of payments from Russia.
Then I thought there was one black hole in your, not so big as those were discovered for the moment, but that is the absence of defense, because I think really that we're going to live in a total new world order. with huge problems for our security. And you never know what happens if tweeting Trump is returning in the US. Then we will be on our own for our own security. So a defense community is an absolute necessity. We are spending today 240 billion euro on defense in Europe, the same amount as China, 4 times more as Russia. We have 130 weapon systems in Europe. We have a world record of soldiers in the world, 2.4 million, and we are powerless. That's at least the sentiment of most people. So my request to you is, when we have a convention, and thank you for supporting it so clearly, we need to talk also by that. And you need to come forward with, I shouldn't say a copy, but a draft like the Treaty of Paris of 1952, negotiated by Adenauer, De Gasperi, and Robert Schuman. That's the way forward. Don't forget it. And fill the black hole, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Verhofstadt. Next is Jack Madison for 1 minute.
Thanks so much, Madam President, Ms. von der Leyen, dear Guy Verhofstadt. I will start with Guy, when he mentioned that the real reason for the huge prices is Putin. I have to just correct you. The prices started to increase 6 months before the war. We had problems already in last year in December and January, and Putin was just a trigger for the real reason. And the real reason is that we have had a crazy green policy in the last 2 decades. We are hating the fossil fuels, we are hating the nuclear, like in Germany. It's a perfect idea, of course. Shut down the nuclear, it's really bad, it's risky. Let's hope for the unstable wind and sun. It's an amazing idea. Go to Sweden in January. There's a lot of sun. It's beautiful. It's like in Spain in the summer. Absolutely, it's a stable energy. And this is the reason why we gave the power to Putin to play with us. And this is also the fault of Mrs. von der Leyen. What did the European Commission at the time when Germany started to build Nord Stream 2? Nothing. They said, oh, it's not a political thing. It's just an economical thing. There is no economics without politics, and that's also your fault. You were also responsible in the last 2 decades when you didn't invest anything in the German defense, and now you are surprised, oh, we can't help Ukraine anymore, and the Russians are playing with us. That's the real reason.
Thank you, Mr. Madison. We give the floor now.
The real reason. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Madison. We give the floor now to Martin Sonneborn for 1 minute.
Sehr geehrte Frau von der
Dear Madam von der Leyen, to use the words of Karl Kraus, nothing comes to mind when talking about the State of the Union. If you look at the gas supply waging a brutal war, Putin, he's attempting to wage war of aggression. A number of media are silent over the situation of the sort of oil dictatorship, and then we see what's happening in democratic Armenia. But then we have to rely on Azerbaijan when it comes to upholding press freedoms, although they're way behind Russia in that respect. And then Aliyev seems to be standing way out in front. We've learned in the meantime that we're sort of neutral in terms of morality. We have refugees queuing up to join us, and we're sort of deleting SMSs, paying up millions to Pfizer. Nothing really comes to mind when talking about the State of the Union. We shouldn't really leave Europe to the amateurs.
Niebler for 1 minute.
Vielen Dank, Frau Parlamentspräsidentin.
Thank you, Madam President, Madam President of the Commission, Council, ladies and gentlemen. Ukraine still needs as much support as we can possibly provide. Madam President, you said it's time to support, not for appeasement. I can only support that. However, our citizens, our businesses are also being hard hit by this crisis. Very high inflation, horrific energy prices. Households have got no room for manoeuvre. Businesses are cutting production and bankruptcy is looming on the horizon. So we talked about, first of all, supply problems, that we have to focus on resources and capacity that applies to energy resources as well as food resources. Secondly, we have to reduce the burden for our citizens rather than increasing it. That's the overall message. I've heard that we're talking about an SME package. So I think that's a fantastic idea. I'm not sure if I should believe it. I know that the machinery in the Commission is continuing to work as ever. It's business as usual. So I very much welcome the proposals regarding what we need to do. What we have to try to do is maintain production and value in Europe so as to avoid other regions benefiting from this war in Europe. Thank you.
To Gabi Bischoff for 1 minute.
Frau Präsidentin, Kollegen.
President, dear colleagues, the ghost of recession is wafting through the European Union, and we have to do something about this. But we have to take a look at a competition of deeds rather than nice words. Now, President, you've referred to specific projects, price caps, etc., certain fiscal measures, which is all good. But there's something that we've systematically ignored, and that is the dreadful consequences of the war and how to deal with those, because we have seen that there is a fear to slide into poverty and a fear of not being able to pay bills and anxiety in the SME world as well. It would be negligent of us if at this particular moment in time we didn't have a SURE 2.0 or SURE Plus, so that we are well armed and well prepared and don't end up facing mass unemployment as well. And this is why I have a request. We have to have social rearmament, as it were, because social peace in Europe needs this.
Adrian Vasquez Lazara for 1 minute.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Madam President. This is not just another State of the Union debate. The measures you've announced to date and the way in which we can implement them will have a major impact in shaping the future of our common project. And more than ever, we require courage, solidarity and resistance. So congratulations to the daring proposals you've made. I hope that we will succeed in implementing. And I hope that we will succeed in lessening the impact of the threats facing our citizens over the next winter. However, don't forget this winter won't just last 4 or 5 months, it will last much longer. This is why we need medium and long-term solutions, such as the construction of infrastructure, interconnection infrastructure, improving links for energy so as to enable us to move towards the energy independence which we need so badly. Can we continue to support a moratorium on nuclear power, enabling us to move towards green objectives, while at the same time asking for further sacrifices from our citizens? We've asked them enough already. And we've been asking this for years now, and they simply can't wait any longer.
This is Harald Wilimski for 1 minute.
Danke sehr, Frau Präsidentin.
Thank you, President. Ladies and gentlemen, it's good that we're talking about the state of Europe today, because it's things are so bad. The situation hasn't been as bad for a long time. Jean-Claude Juncker might suggest things will only get better, but I think we've learned that politics are going the wrong way. The European nomenclature would drive Europe into the wall. That would certainly be the case today. Just 2 examples of that. Firstly, the corona madness, where we had a continent-wide lockdown, lockdown policies undermining the welfare state. We've manufactured unemployment with firms, businesses going to the wall. And then there's the sanction madness in terms of the war Russia's waging against Ukraine, where we're not sort of standing out for peace, but we're sending money and weapons and placing European citizens in an emergency situation. We're saying don't take, sort of baths, have showers, turn the heating down. And I hope that with the forthcoming elections, things will change so that Europe will be able to move in the direction of peace and prosperity for as many European citizens as possible. Thank you.
Ilan Urik for 1 minute.
Ďakujem pekne.
Yes, thank you very much. Madam von der Leyen, you said that the EU needs to fight against corruption within the EU. So why don't you want to publish your communication with the director, with the CEO of Pfizer? Here we're talking about the sale, purchase rather, of Pfizer vaccines worth 30 million euros. You're keeping the secret from the public, from the auditors. This is the real image of the EU. You think this is transparent? On the basis of this, you want European citizens to trust the EU? You said that Europe gave Ukraine, I don't know how many billion euros. And again, let me ask you, where does this money come from and what is not being paid instead? Who do we pay this money to? Isn't this being stolen by oligarchs? Is somebody controlling where all these billions and billions of euros from European taxpayers, where all this money goes? Or is this also a toxic question now because somebody might find it not so pleasant to hear? I really don't want this EU to serve only corporations and superpowers. We'll be talking about this again and again because this is our work. Thank you.
Halicki for 1 minute.
Pani President.
President of the Commission. Yes, there is war in Europe, and not only the crimes and aggression in Ukraine, the Russian aggression, but also a war about energy security of supply, war, labour, but we're also fighting over citizens' rights as well. And anybody that attacks the solidarity and the unity of our European Union and community and tries to undermine our efforts to defend those most important ideas is they're standing together with Russia or the enemies of Europe and their allies of Putin. And this is why I would very much like to thank you, your warm words about Poland and the reservations. And I think what we have to do is ensure that we do strengthen the European Energy Union, going back to words of Donald Tusk. But I think we also ought to spread ourselves and take a look at Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, some of the Balkan countries, and try and bring them into our community as well. So we have to show in practice our European solidarity. And to the Czech presidency, obviously we took a first step in 2007 with some of the steps we take then, but we need signatures as well. We need to get cross-party, cross-group support and signatures from ID to the Greens as well, so that all families, everybody from the central administrations, because we have to try and persuade Russian society that what's being done is wrong, because we have to send out this message, I think.
1 minute.
Mulțumesc, doamnă președintă von der Leyen. Salutăm propunerile concrete.
Thank you very much, Madam President. President von der Leyen, we very much commend the proposals you've made. However, we believe the time has come for us to act together and as quickly as possible. The measures you've announced in the term of energy, for example, are something which we as socialists have been calling for many months now. Madam President, you can't ask people to consume less energy while at the same time enabling markets such as EDS to continue. If we want to cut energy bills, we have to bring an end to speculation on spot markets, for example, the European Union, Schengen. As you know, Schengen is not complete. You said beforehand that Romania has fulfilled all the criteria to join the Schengen area. I know you hope that Bulgaria and Romania will be able to join soon. I can promise you that my country has been working every day to fulfill the criteria so as to protect the eastern borders of the European Union. So, Madam President, I do hope that your declarations will be translated into reality so that to ensure that Romania, Bulgaria and indeed Croatia can join the Schengen area. Thank you.
Thank you, dear President. In the last 2 years, Europe has gone through several crises that it managed to partially or fully solve.
The food crisis, however, due to its nature, is much more difficult to tackle. Its effects are particularly devastating for the poorest and most vulnerable people, and even for our cohesion. We are dealing with a complex subject with impacts on consumers, on farmers, but also on transporters, on industries, on trade, but also has a geopolitical and strategic impact. The warning signs are already there. We see soaring food, energy and fertilizer prices, and we cannot afford to wait any longer to take action. Let's not ignore the consequences and have a coherent plan that, together with my colleagues having experience in agri-food policy, we started working on it, but we need your support, Mrs. President. The human tragedy for the war in Ukraine must not be combined with another looming tragedy, a global food crisis. Because when we are already in a food crisis, it's too late to act, it's too costly to act, so this is why we have to prevent this. And if we do not act now, the cost of social, economic and even security and geopolitical terms will become too high. So we call on you, Mrs. President, to come up with a comprehensive agenda for global food and nutrition security, and we will be here to help. I heard today some ideas, some proposals. The Commission already took some measures, but what we need is more than just supporting farmers. We need supporting farmers, but we need more for that, because food security means more than just producing food.
Thank you, Mr. Cholos. Next is the Honourable Bogdan for 1 minute.
Excelențele voastre, vin în fața dumneavoastră.
Ladies and gentlemen, I stand before you as a representative of one of the countries that is most attached to the values of the European family, solidarity, through a feeling of solidarity and European spirit. Romania came to the assistance of Ukrainians who are fleeing war in the name of solidarity. We have assisted the passage of trains full of cereals heading for Western Europe, and in the other direction there are trains, a convoy is taking assistance and aid to Ukraine. In the name of solidarity, Romania agrees with providing energy to those who have less in the name of solidarity, but in terms of its own legislation, Romania welcomes entry into the Schengen area after a long and unjustified wait of 11 years. There are a number of countries knocking on the door. Romania has fulfilled all the conditions and secured its borders using its own resources. Where is solidarity? I think there is a risk if we see the number of populists and nationalists on the increase. Is there anyone who's going to bear that risk when we have a majority of people who are Eurosceptics rather than pro-European? The European people are not asking for favors, but dignified status in Europe based on solidarity and continuity. We want justice for Romania. We want to be part of the Schengen area. That is our right.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Nobody can imagine the morality and power or strength of somebody who defends his own, such as the Ukrainians. We have felt the war ourselves and know this best. Our citizens show solidarity with the Ukrainians, but we need to ensure that this crisis does not come at the cost of the citizens. We need to ensure a permanent European crisis mechanism. To some, this is a gift, a system where small entrepreneurs pay a larger percentage of tax than a large multinational company is deeply unjust. We need European taxes, but also an efficient global response. Let us take from those who have and give to those who are in need. Croatia is facing a special challenge. Prices are on the rampage, and some are using the introduction of euro to profit from it as well. I salute intentions to prevent corruption. European legislation is the only hope for some, unfortunately. But we need to fight on all levels against those who put their own profit in front before the interest of the citizens. Thank you.
Shuk for 1 minute.
Благодаря, госпожо председател. Госпожо фон дер Лайен, благодаря ви.
Thank you very much, President. Ms. von der Leyen, thank you very much for all your efforts. I do believe that Europe should be united, not only internally. We should not allow any division because third factors outside expect that, but also outside of Europe we should be united. We should have the authority to build new partnerships and to stand behind our values. You were talking about a political community. I do like this idea very much. I think we should have new partnerships and new friendships, but it's very difficult to see the Western Balkans as this part of community, and they do have to be part of the European Union. Historically and geographically, they are part of Europe, and I do want them to be an integral part of the European Union. Generations on end, many national politicians have been working to come close to Europe. The first challenge that we have is to make Europe different in 2024, because then the populists against liberal Democrats will fight an even bigger battle. And I think we need the right answers here. And I do believe that the Conference on the Future of Europe has a lot of answers to give. The conclusions were very good, and I do believe that these conclusions should be implemented in practice, and there should be a real convention where all the answers will be given.
Yes, thank you very much, President. Only a few days ago, Putin buried without honor Mikhail Gorbachev. How wrong they are in Kremlin, because history will remember Mikhail Gorbachev and condemn Putin. And the resistance, the heroism of Ukraine are the best way in resisting what's going on there. And obviously, Europe is going to stand firm as a rock in support of Ukraine, because Ukraine, the cause of Ukraine, is one of Europe. Obviously, there are very many challenges in the wake of this. We have to fight ceaselessly against inflation because this is totally unfair for our families. We have to strengthen our energy community and sector so that it's not the citizens that pay for the increase in prices. We also have to do something about defense of freedoms and rights in Latin America and support African countries. But I think there is a source of energy which is much more powerful than oil and gas, and that is our European values, democracy, our freedoms, and our rule of law. As somebody, as a Spanish poet said, these are arms that are armed for the future. Thank you. And long live a free Ukraine.
Madam President, Madam President of the Commission, I think much of what you've said today should and must be supported. However, the key issue is that we ensure that we don't underestimate the enormous potential social impact of this crisis. Our citizens can no longer afford the cost of living. They're being hit by inflation, rising food and other prices, underlined by the enormous jump in energy prices. It's important for us to tax excess profits. We have to try to use that money to help those who can no longer afford to feed their homes. However, the way that energy markets have been designed, they no longer work. We need a radical intervention. The liberalisation of energy markets has been a failure. At the end of the day, this process has neither guaranteed supply or reasonable prices. Moreover, we have to learn lessons from this. Is why we shouldn't go too far with liberalisation in many other areas. I know there's a tendency for the Commission to push forward with such ideas, in particular in the rail sector. This is why, ladies and gentlemen, I believe that the overriding priority for us must be to remember the social impact of what's happening so as to ensure that we don't further tear apart our society. Thank you.
Bellamy for 1 minute.
Madame la Présidente, la crise que nous...
Madam President, the crisis that we're traversing is forcing us all to look reality in the face, in particular when it comes to energy, so we can emerge for our independence and protect the environment. You want to develop wind energy. You quoted Denmark as an energy with 10,000 wind farms. It depends on coal mines and has to import electricity, and Sweden's is a carbon imprint of 50% less. If we allow Germany to close its nuclear power plants but have to export gas. We're going to have to import gas from Azerbaijan, dependent on another criminal regime. I hope that we will all stand up to counter Aliyev's aggression against Armenia. Looking at reality means refusing rules where we see a drop in agricultural production in Europe, whereas the increases in food prices we're seeing throughout. We should not increase outdated trade treaties. We want to guard against future vulnerability. We want to support Frontex, patrol our borders rather than undermining it. What we need to do is better train and educate young people. You talk about solidarity between generations, writing that into the treaties. We share the spirit of that, but that starts with a reality check.
Just for 1 minute.
Gracias, Presidente.
Thank you, President. And President of the Commission, thank you for your brilliant presentation of the State of the Union. I think, however, we should really be talking about the positive evolution, the positive trends of the State of the Union, and this is because there has been a change of paradigm. Obviously, there's a possibility of social division, austerity. That would be one response, but we've decided to opt for unity, solidarity, and protecting the interests of the majority against the interests of a few. And we've placed citizens right at the heart of our political actions. There are two urgent tasks that we have to face. We have to make sure there aren't any power cuts across Europe for homes and industry. And then, of course, we do have to help the neediest in our societies. And this is why the socialists very much support the measures that you've put forward in your speech. And these are measures that have been being applied by the Spanish government for over a year. And I'm very happy to see that they have found their way up to the European level. What is lamentable, however, is that the right wing in my country is refusing them one by one to try and undermine us.
Angelika Winzig for 1 minute.
Sehr geehrte Frau Präsidentin, Frau
Madam President, Madam President of the Commission, colleagues. The European economy is going through a very gloomy period. More and more taxes are undermining our competitiveness, as is the case with the pushing through of the Green Deal and sanctions against Russia. There's a lack of accompanying measures for our companies. One German company in 5 is thinking about transferring production abroad. And following comments from the German economics minister suggesting that some bakers could close down temporarily because of high energy costs, and the bakers can then consumers can buy bread from low-cost retail outlets, that's not something which encourages optimism. That's very bad, of course, for the European economy, but for the German economy, but also for the European economy. This is why it's so important that we succeed at the European level in quickly bringing energy costs under control. This is important for our companies, our citizens, jobs and competitiveness. The European Union has to demonstrate that it's not going to by flexing our political muscles. We don't want to force our economy into bankruptcy.
Presidentessa von der Leyen, la speranza siamo...
President von der Leyen, we represent hope when we don't close our eyes to those who are in need, when we don't erect walls along our borders, when we combat forms of injustice. These words of David Sassoli, we need to remember them today. They're a sort of a warning for us all. Europe, as you have quite rightly underscored, has to start a convention in order to reform itself, to do away with the veto rights and to finally have the powers that we need and protect citizens against war, inflation, to protect citizens against rising energy prices. We have the nationalist right standing in the way of that in Poland and the ultra-nationalists in Holland. The package of the defense of democracy that you announced today is very important. I hope the Lega will vote in favour. It's the only party that would disagree with that, but unfortunately, Giorgia Meloni, Fratelli d'Italia, is flirting with Trump, hoping a repeat of Brexit, and once again that runs counter to our interests, the interests of Italians and Europeans. But nationalism has already lost out on this continent, in spite of the shameful complicity of the so-called moderates. We need to put an end to their dealings, I'm sure.
Next is Andrei Kovachev for 1 minute.
Благодаря, госпожо председател.
Thank you, Madam President. I do welcome the clear willingness of the European Commission to continue its support for Ukraine and to show solidarity with the Ukrainian people who fight against the Russian aggression. The Bulgarian motto, "United we stand strong," must guide the European Council too. The more united we are, the more quickly we will overcome our challenges, be they energy prices or anything else.
The President of the Council, we have another armed conflict on the sovereign territory of Armenia. I urge you very much that the European Union is doing the utmost to stop this killing of people. In the last 2 days, tens, if not hundreds of people are killed, civil infrastructure is destroyed. This must stop. I don't believe that the Russians are interested for long-standing peaceful solution. They like to stay there and to have their influence there, but not to have a peace in the Caucasus region. So this is up to us, the European Union, to take the role of a mediator to stop this conflict. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrei. Next is Jens Geier for 1 minute.
Thank you, President. Mrs. von der Leyen, I'd like to thank you for the proposals that you have made in the face of the energy price crisis. Energy price and tax on windfall profits, that's a good thing. And also in order to separate electricity gas prices, and I think that's an excellent idea. Who knows, maybe we may come up with an idea which will work better in times of peace. But the most important thing is the gas price. We know what's wrong with all of this, and we know that we need new proposals, and I hope very much that we will make swift progress on these proposals. Mrs. von der Leyen, when you talk about the State of Union, obviously we're talking about the state of democracy and the rule of law in the European Union. You can't be silent on that. That was a bit of a gap in your speech, but it doesn't mean that that should disappear from our agenda. And it's only by overcoming these that we can really guarantee the state of our union.
Ursula. Thank you, Madam President of the Commission, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak.
You spoke a lot about energy, and rightly so, and to your credit, you've gone around the world trying to get LNG supplies for Europe. But I'm sorry to say that in my country, we have an opportunity to build an LNG terminal free of charge to the government, which one arm of government is blocking. We also have vast gas resources off our coast which are not being utilised. And yet we are largely dependent on one pipeline from the United Kingdom. And today the United Kingdom said if Russia cuts off supplies of gas to Europe, then there will be gas rationing and electricity outages in the United Kingdom and Ireland. So I would ask you to ask countries like Ireland to use the resources and opportunities they have and not to be scrounging on the supplies that other member states need. And also to remove the roadblocks to the deployment of renewables, especially planning and permission. And one final ask, maybe not to put the clocks back this winter to save energy.
Thank you, Sean. Next is Christel Schaldemose for 1 minute.
Thank you very much. The greatest test for a community is how do you handle the crisis you meet together? And if Putin thought that invading Ukraine would divide us in the EU, he was very wrong. Because he has shown that European values, when they are attacked, we stand together, just like we did with COVID. But now it's the energy crisis and inflation that is threatening us. Businesses are threatened, citizens are threatened. We need to solve that. But the crisis is not just a financial threat, it's also a threat to our future. People talk about reducing our green ambitions, postponing green initiatives, but that's not the right way to go. So my message is quite simple. The inflation and energy crisis mustn't stop our green transition. It has to be a stepping stone. Let's not slow down, but increase in the green transition. Because the EU has shown that we can stand together when it really matters, also when it comes to the climate crisis. Thank you.
1 minute 30.
1 minute 30. Madam President of the Parliament, President of the Commission, thank you. Thank you for your inspiring statement. I think it should be a source of inspiration for us all. And thank you for recalling that force or the strength of the Union is the fact that we can act together if we're united. And thank you also for once again having expressed your solidarity with the Ukrainian people. What is happening in Ukraine concerns our future, the future of our children. So thank you for having said that so forcefully. You've also put forward some very tangible short-term measures in the field of energy, in the energy sector. And you know how in our country so many families are despairing, very many businesses, undertakings are experiencing difficulties, and you had the courage to suggest that the major energy firms contribute. They have, after all, benefited from huge income, so they need to be taxed. You have suggested that this windfall go to the families that are experiencing hardship in greatest difficulty. I think we need to uncouple the gas and electricity markets, as you suggested, in order to avoid excessive costs for businesses and households in the future. And you talk about laying a foundation for a European strategy when it comes to greater sovereignty and autonomy when it comes to energy. Madam President, the European Council and all those who have spoken out recently need to show the same diligence or speed of execution, because we're faced with urgency, the need to support Ukraine, but also an urgent need to support all European citizens so that they can believe in a stronger, united Europe.
Benoit.
Blue card. Benoit Lutgen, a blue card.
La collègue Maria Spirakis.
There's a blue card from Maria Spirakis. Can you accept a blue card? Will you respond? Maria.
Thank you. Dear colleague, I have a question for you. Are you satisfied? Are you satisfied by the way the President of the Commission described this new disconnection between the natural gas price and the price of electricity? Should we not give more details? Because we need more investments. I'm going to go to Thessaloniki tomorrow, and I have to explain to them solidarity. What is it going to mean in practice over this very harsh winter? All the measures that were proposed today by the Commission have already been adopted by Greece. So when is the next step coming, and how fast is it going to be here?
Alors, effectivement, je souhaite qu'on ait des détails.
Indeed, I think we need more details on the sort of uncoupling. I think it's a good thing, indeed, this uncoupling. The electricity that's produced not from gas shouldn't be impacted to the same extent in terms of firms and households. I think that is a good decision, so that we're not forced, and that's why we're trying to correct by taxing energy companies, so that we can see a move towards renewables. But those who made colossal profits in an unjustified way should be called upon to contribute. But I think we should call on Commission and Council to provide the details of these proposals. But I think the objectives have been sort of laid down by the President of the Commission, and I think they are a step in the right direction when it comes to supporting businesses, households, and all in society.
For 1 minute.
Thank you, President. At the beginning of the month, many people know they won't reach the end of the month with any money in their account, and this is a situation faced by far too many Europeans. That's part of their daily reality, and this eats away at them inside. The Dutch government has failed to demonstrate the urgency necessary to tackle the cost of living crisis. when it comes to Rutte for government, they're simply behind the times. And this is something we can't afford at the present time. I think we have to be honest. We have to admit that this cost of living crisis might lead to a recession. And a recession could then provide a feeding ground for unrest and for populist parties. This is why, Madam President of the Commission, I would appeal to, please don't allow this to happen. Encourage member states to act immediately so as to respect European standards when it comes to decent measures such as a minimum salary, minimum wage. We have to ensure that we have permanent programs to do this so as to keep employment levels high while not threatening companies.
Catch the eye. We have 5 minutes. We have many requests, so I will give 1 minute to 5 colleagues in the order in which we receive them. First is Maria Walsh.
Madam President, I very much welcome a new mental health initiative through a citizens' panel. This is an incredibly important and a positive step forward following our Future of Europe conference, following the impact of COVID, the stresses of isolation and the war that we are all living through. We must, through an EU year of education and training and a citizens' panel dedicated to mental health, really look at and finally understand the root causes of mental health and how it's impacting all facets of a person's life, especially our young people. You mentioned SMEs. Madam President, we know from research that an employee is more productive, over 30 days more productive, if an employer looks at their well-being and the mentality that they have. That is sustainability. Let's together deliver a citizens' panel and prepare for a 2024 EU year dedicated to mental health. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Thank you very much. Is Kostas Mavridis here? Okay, we go to the next request. Margarida Marquez. Yes.
Muito obrigada, Presidente. Muito obrigada, Presidente von der Leyen.
President, thank you very much, and thank you to President von der Leyen for your statement on the State of the Union. During your presentation, you listed a series of new initiatives, a European Hydrogen Bank, a European Sovereignty Fund, a new programme for SMEs, also an initiative for mental health, and then other various initiatives in the area of energy, and by providing further capacity for the civil protection mechanism. So my question is as follows. If we move forward with a proposal for reviewing the MFF, how is that going to deal with transferring all those initiatives into the budget? Secondly, you also listed various principles so that we could review the budgetary rules, and obviously these have to be aligned with the principles adopted by the Parliament last year. So when are we going to have the legislative initiatives which will actually open the door for us to be able to revise these rules?
Boutmans.
Thank you, Madam President. Ms von der Leyen, thank you very much for your address today. Once again, you've showed that the European Union has a human face. You spoke with great courage about the system in Ukraine, and we support you when it comes to European sanctions, and I think we all very much agree when it comes to energy, price ceilings, income support. But I would like to have had a bit more information on the timeline, a strict timetable. This is what our citizens want. We hope that you can come forward with some details on a very strict timeline over the next few days. So don't take this badly, but I'm surprised, I know you very well, that you haven't spoken at all about the European Defence Union. I take this as, by this I mean the European Army. So perhaps you could give us some hope with that. We need the European Defence Union. Another point, Ms von der Leyen, we've had the convention, we've had citizens' panels. We've seen them put forward fantastic proposals. So we should build on the convention. If we want Europe to occupy an important place in the world, we have to do away with the unanimity principle. Please support that.
Mr. Bütikofer, you asked to take the floor.
Frau Präsidentin von der Leyen.